The blood tasted like iron and old rain. Elias Rook woke face down in a puddle of it, his cheek pressed against cold stone that vibrated with the screaming alarms of Hellgate's upper ring. Above him, cell 7113 hung open like a rotting tooth, its door wrenched off hinges by claws that had torn through solid granite from below. The predecessor who had worn this badge before him dangled from the cell frame, feet barely clearing the floor. Keys stripped from his belt save for one cracked brass pendant, now pressed hot and heavy into Elias's palm. The air smelled of ozone and wet fur. Something down in the dark throat of cell 7113 scratched at stone, rhythmic and hungry. Captain Vale kicked the door open, her boots splashing through the gore. 6 guards fanned out behind her, rifles raised but shaking. She looked at Elias's face buried in the blood, then at the hanging corpse, then at the empty cell. Her eyes narrowed, dismissing his terror as aristocratic shock. "If you have a final prayer, make it quick," she said, her voice flat against the blaring sirens. "We don't have time for nobles who faint." Elias rolled over, gasping. The brass pendant burned his skin. He looked up at the ceiling, where cracks spider-webbed across the masonry. The system flickered in his vision, blue light cutting through the gloom. Hellgate Warden system activated. Emergency objective, prevent upper ring collapse. Available personnel, 37 guards. Reliable personnel. 9. Look at the walls, Elias croaked, pointing a trembling finger at the spreading fractures. It's not just a breach, the foundation is rotting. Seraphine glanced up, then back down at him with disdain. "Stay behind my line, Warden."
You're lucky we haven't dragged your body out with the rest of the waste. Check the perimeter.
Forcing himself to stand on shaky legs, he grabbed her arm as she turned. Now, she wrenched free, drawing her sidearm.
Do not touch me. If you want to live, keep your mouth shut and your hands up. The breaches are contained by protocol until they aren't. There's no protocol for this.
The truth of it echoing off the damp stone. He pulled a crumpled map from his pocket. The official Hellgate layout. This is wrong. The paths here lead to the royal catacomb access. They hide the capital route. Someone built this place to keep things in or out. Seraphine stared at the map, then at the dark hole in cell 7-1-3. "You're blaming the architecture? We have 11 simultaneous breaches. The nearest one holds Dorian Ash, the hero scheduled for execution tomorrow," Elias finished.
"If he gets out, he won't just kill you. He'll burn the whole ring down to see if it works."
Dorian Ash is a traitor.
Though her grip on her rifle tightened.
He doesn't get to decide what burns. I'm not talking about him.
He shoved the map into her chest.
Show me who profits when this place fails. Because right now, everyone wants us dead except each other.
Seraphine looked at the map, then at the ceiling as a chunk of stone fell with a thunderous crack. She didn't answer. She just raised her rifle toward the darkness. Hours earlier, Elias Rook stared at the brass pendant in his hand. It wasn't a key, it was a contract seal. The metal hummed, warm and alive, pulsing in time with the distant heartbeats of 300 inmates sleeping below. He had spent his life on Earth calculating risk, assessing collapse scenarios for insurance firms that profited from disaster. It had hired one to manage the collapse. He looked at the map spread across the command desk. The lines weren't just architectural, they were financial. Every corridor led to a ledger, every cell block to a profit margin. The Crown didn't want Hellgate secure, they wanted it fragile. A controlled burn of dissent, a predictable supply of labor for the mines, and a steady stream of executions to keep the population afraid. Elias traced the line from cell 7113 down into the bedrock. It didn't lead to freedom, it led to power. A knock at the door broke his silence. Captain Vale entered, her uniform immaculate, her face a mask of disciplined indifference. She carried a stack of files thick with bloodstains and official seals. "You're early," she said, dropping the files on the desk, "and you're alone. That's unusual for your caste." Elias didn't look up from the map. "I don't need an entourage to see what's wrong. I need eyes that aren't blind to it." Seraphine crossed her arms. "Your predecessors lasted 3 months, Rook. Most of them ended up in the same cells they were supposed to guard. Why should you be different? I believe in leverage, and right now Hellgate is bankrupt." Seraphine laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. The prison? It's full of gold reserves and condemned souls. Elias traced the red ink on the map with a calloused finger. It's leverage. The Crown keeps Hellgate starving so they can control the supply chain outside its walls. They want us to fail, Seraphine. They need a crisis to justify martial law in the capital. Seraphine slammed a hand onto the desk, rattling the loose files.
You think you understand the Crown? You've been here 6 hours. I've spent 20 years walking these halls while they rot from the inside out. And do you know what I see? Weakness. The guards are tired. The walls are thin. And now, with the purge rumors swirling in the lower blocks, everyone is looking for a scapegoat. The purge isn't a rumor.
His voice dropping to a cold, flat register.
It's a strategy. Look at the breach points. They're synchronized. This isn't an accident. It's a demolition.
Seraphine stared at him, her eyes narrowing as she searched for any sign of hesitation. Finding none, she straightened her uniform jacket, her expression hardening into something resembling respect, or perhaps dread.
If this is a demolition, then we are the debris. What's your play, Rook? Because if you have one, it better be faster than that clock ticking in my head. I need access to the forge ring.
Pointing to a shaded area on the map that was marked as structural integrity compromised.
The cooling towers? If I can reroute the thermal pressure, I can seal the breaches in the upper ring for at least an hour. Long enough to get everyone out. The forge ring is locked down.
It's been sealed since the last uprising. The guards who tried to access it were fed to the mawbound. Then we take them back.
He didn't blink.
I have the pendant. It's not just a seal, it's a key. But I need you to convince your loyalists to stop shooting at each other and start following orders.
Seraphine let out a short, sharp breath that might have been a laugh if she weren't so terrified.
My loyalists don't follow orders from a man who smells like blood and bad decisions. They follow results. And right now, you're not delivering either. Then watch.
He turned back to the map, his finger hovering over the line connecting cell 7113 to the royal catacomb access. There's a path down, behind the cell wall. Something clawed through from below, which means the stone is hollow, which means there's a maintenance shaft. If we go down there, we can bypass the breached corridors entirely. Down. Seraphine stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper.
Into the dark? That's where the purge starts, Rook. The inmates down there aren't human anymore. They're things made by the Crown's experiments. You want to walk into that? I want to find out who signed the order.
He looked up, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her take a half step back. And I want to stop them from burning the whole world down just to collect the insurance payout. Seraphine hesitated. The alarms above grew louder, vibrating in their teeth. Dust fell from the ceiling in thick clouds. She looked at the map, then at Elias, then at her 6 guards who were waiting for a command they didn't trust. Before we get into the story, do me a quick favor. Like this video, subscribe, and comment what story you want to see next. Now, let's begin.
If we die, I'm haunting you first. Deal.
He tucked the pendant into his pocket and grabbed a rifle from one of the shaking guards. Lead the way, Captain. Try not to trip. Elias moved towards cell 7113, the brass pendant burning against his thigh. Seraphine flanked him, her rifle raised, barking orders that dissolved into the chaos of collapsing masonry. Left. Hold the line. Seraphine screamed at 2 guards who were scrambling backward over a pile of rubble. Do not break formation. If you run, I will shoot you myself. The guards obeyed, though their hands shook so violently they nearly dropped their weapons. Elias ignored them, focusing on the hole in the wall of cell 71113. It wasn't just an opening. It was a wound in the prison's anatomy, raw stone jagged against smooth concrete. From within, a sound emanated, not a growl, but a rhythmic, metallic scraping, like claws dragging across steel.
He's here.
His voice calm despite the tremor in the floor.
Dorian Ash.
Seraphine didn't lower her weapon. Stay back, Rook. That cell is a death trap. It's a tomb, Elias corrected. He stepped closer to the edge of the breach, and he's waking up inside it. Look at the walls. See the scratch marks? They're descending, not ascending. Something came down from above us, or something came up from below and is trying to hide. Seraphine squinted, her eyes narrowing as she tracked the faint vibrations in the air.
You think it's a breach protocol failure? I think it's a message.
He pulled the cracked brass pendant from his pocket, holding it up to the flickering emergency lights. The metal glowed with a faint, sickly violet light, pulsing in time with the distant alarms.
The system is reacting to a localized energy spike. Right here, the Warden system.
Her tone shifting from hostility to curiosity.
I thought that was a myth, a story guards told new recruits to keep them honest. It's real.
He tapped the pendant against his palm.
And it's hungry. It wants a contract. But I don't have anything left to give.
Then what are you doing?
Lowering her rifle slightly.
You're standing in front of a hole that just ate my predecessor. Are you insane? I'm calculating. The Crown doesn't build prisons to keep people in. They build them to keep something out, or to keep something in from escaping.
He looked at the dark void within the cell. Dorian Ashe isn't the prisoner. He's the lock. And someone just broke the keyhole. A heavy thud echoed from inside cell 7113. Then another, the sound of chains dragging across stone. Behind you, one of the guards shouted, pointing toward the corridor behind them. Elias turned. The ceiling above was collapsing, dust and debris raining down in a suffocating cloud. But through the haze he saw them, shadows moving in the lower levels, silhouetted against the faint glow of the purge fires, spreading through the prison's underbelly.
We need to move.
Seraphine said, grabbing Elias's arm.
Now, I can't leave yet.
Pulling his arm free. He stared into the darkness of cell 7103.
The system is speaking. I can feel it. It's telling me something.
Seraphine demanded, her patience wearing thin.
Does it want us to die? It wants us to choose. It's showing me the truth. The breaches aren't random. They're coordinated. And they're leading somewhere. Where? To the Royal Catacomb access. The map was a lie. The Crown hid this path because it connects Hellgate directly to the capital's foundations. If Dorian Ashe escapes through here, he won't just kill us. He'll burn the government from the inside out.
Seraphine stared at him, her face pale in the emergency lighting.
You're saying the prisoner scheduled for execution is the only thing standing between us and total war? I'm saying,
tucking the pendant away,
that I need you to trust me. Just once, before the world ends.
Seraphine hesitated, her eyes darting between the collapsing ceiling and the dark cell. Then, slowly, she lowered her rifle completely.
If you're wrong, Rook, I will kill you myself. If I'm right,
stepping toward the breach,
you'll thank me for saving your soul.
He walked into the darkness of cell 71133. The system activated in his mind, overlaying the world with cold, hard data. Emergency objective: prevent upper ring collapse. Available personnel: 37 guards. Reliable personnel: 9 hidden passage detected. Cell 7113 Royal Catacomb access. The data washed over Elias like cold water, stripping away the panic and leaving only the sharp clinical edge of assessment. The numbers didn't lie. 37 bodies in uniform, bound by oath and fear, 9 willing to follow a command that didn't smell like surrender. The rest were already dead. They just hadn't stopped moving yet. She lunged forward, her hand closing around his wrist before he could cross the threshold of the breached stone. "Stop," she said, her voice low and tight with tension. "You're walking into a slaughterhouse. Look at the walls, Rook. Really look." Elias didn't pull away. He held her gaze, letting the flickering red light from the corridor play across his face. "I am looking, Captain, and I'm seeing structural fatigue in the load-bearing pillars behind that debris. The collapse isn't random. It's being directed." "Directed by who?" Seraphine demanded, tightening her grip on his arm.
By whom are these breaches coming from?
You think this is a riot? This is an execution. It's a harvest.
He turned his head slightly, forcing her to follow his line of sight down into the dark maw of cell 713. "Look at the dust. It's not falling evenly. It's being pulled inward. There's a vacuum below. Something is breathing. Then let it breathe," one of the guards shouted from the back of the corridor, his voice cracking under. "The strain. Seal it? You try to seal a wound in an artery and see what happens. You'll kill the patient. Do you want us dead, Sergeant?" "I want us alive," the guard snapped, raising his weapon toward the darkness.
"And you're standing in the way. Stand down."
Her voice sharpening like a blade. She didn't look at the guard. She kept her eyes locked on Elias. "Our orders are to keep Hellgate standing," Elias countered. He stepped closer to her, forcing her to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "Hellgate is already standing. It's just leaning on a corpse. My predecessor didn't fail because he was weak. He failed because he tried to follow the map." He pulled the cracked brass pendant from his pocket again. The violet pulse had quickened, syncing with the erratic thumping of his own heart. "This key opens more than just a lock, Seraphine. It opens an argument. Do you want to know why the Crown built this place in the first place? Do you want to know who gets paid when the upper ring falls? I don't care about contracts, Seraphine spat, though her jaw tightened.
I care that my team is shaking because they think we're going to die. Then give them a reason to live.
He gestured to the dark opening in cell 7 to 113.
We go down. We find the source of the vacuum. We close it. And we do it before the structural integrity drops below 10%.
And if we don't? The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating.
Then we become part of the Foundation.
He released her wrist, turning fully toward the cell.
And you'll have your death, Captain. But it will be pointless.
He took a step forward, into the shadow of the breach. The temperature dropped instantly, a chill that had nothing to do with the rain outside. From the depths of the cell, a voice echoed out, ragged, metallic, and terrifyingly calm.
You brought me an audience.
The words came from nowhere and everywhere at once, vibrating in the stone beneath Elias's feet.
How delightful. Who's there? Identify yourself. I am the lock.
His voice dropping an octave, resonating in Elias's ribs.
And you are holding the key. Tell me, Warden, in waiting. Do you know how much blood it takes to turn a prison into a god?
Elias stared into the blackness, his mind racing through the calculus of survival. I know that you're not trying to escape, he said loudly, projecting his voice toward the center of the cell. You're trying to break out from the inside. There's a difference. Differences for the living. Dorian Ash chuckled, a sound like grinding stones.
Are you one of them, Rook? Or are you just another ghost waiting for its appointment? I'm alive enough to read your chains.
He crouched slightly, examining the grooves in the stone floor where the iron had been torn free. They're not holding you in. They're holding something else down. You're the cage, Dorian, not the prisoner.
What is he talking about? Rook, what are you doing? I'm negotiating.
He stood up, walking deeper into the cell, until the darkness swallowed his lower half. Dorian Ash, commander of the Ashen Company, accused of treason, scheduled for execution at dawn, but
Evidence.
pulling a crumpled, blood-stained sheet from his tunic. It was the official execution warrant, stamped with the royal seal. Proof that you were never meant to escape. You were meant to be sacrificed. He tossed the paper into the dark. Dorian Ash's chains rattled as he moved, a heavy metallic growl echoing from the shadows. I have none left for the crown. What do you offer, Rook? Mercy? It is a currency I no longer accept. Equity. The breaches aren't coming from your cell. They're being pulled by something below it, and if they breach the royal catacomb access, the upper ring falls. Everyone dies. Including you. Seraphine gasped from the corridor entrance, her rifle raised.
Elias, don't. He's lying. He's bleeding.
He extended a hand into the darkness, palm open. Show me the path, Dorian, or stay chained and die with the rest of us. Silence stretched, thin and brittle. Then, a low laugh rumbled through the stone, vibrating in Elias's teeth.
You are either a fool or a genius, Warden. Very well. Walk. But know this, once you see what lies beneath Hellgate, you will never look at the crown the same way again.
Elias didn't hesitate. He stepped over the threshold into the pit. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and old blood. From above, Seraphine shouted orders to her guards, but her voice sounded distant, muffled by the sheer weight of the decision Elias had just made. Emergency objective: prevent upper ring collapse. Available personnel: 37 guards. Reliable personnel: 9. Hidden passage detected. Cell 7 113, Royal Catacomb access. The cold stone bit into my cheek, slick with a mixture of rainwater and something thicker, darker, that smelled faintly of copper. I pushed myself up, my muscles screaming in protest, every nerve ending firing with the phantom echo of the crash that had killed me. The last thing I remembered was the spreadsheet glowing on my monitor, the red lines marking which districts would be evacuated and which were already lost to the flood. I had calculated the acceptable losses. I had signed the order. Then the ceiling collapsed. Now I was here, Hellgate. Alarms screamed from above, a jagged mechanical wail that vibrated through the damp walls of cell 7113. The air was thick with black rainwater seeping through cracks in the masonry, pooling around my boots. I looked down at my hands. They were younger, harder, but covered in blood that wasn't mine. Clutched in my right palm was a cracked brass pendant, warm against my skin, pressing into my flesh until it hurt. It was the only key remaining from the previous warden's collection, or so it seemed. A shadow fell over me, blocking out the flickering torchlight from the corridor. I looked up to see Captain Vale standing at the cell threshold, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. She wore the standard guard uniform, stained with mud and old gore, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. Behind her stood 6 other guards, their faces pale, their formations loose, terrified.
You're awake.
Her voice flat, devoid of surprise.
I expected you to stay down. Dead men don't cause trouble.
I prefer to think of it as unexpectedly resourceful, I replied, pushing myself fully upright. My knees popped. I ignored the system that had just manifested in my vision, its blue text hovering like a ghost. Hellgate Warden system activated. Prison integrity, 18% active inmates, 4,892. Seraphine stepped closer, her boots splashing in the bloody water. The Crown expects compliance, not riddles. You are the new warden by virtue of being the last one standing in that cell. Your predecessor is a corpse, your authority is paper thin. And you have 12 minutes before the next breach collapses this entire wing. I looked past her, down the corridor. The stone walls were weeping black sludge. Scratches, deep gouging marks ran along the floorboards, leading away from the deeper dark of the prison's underbelly. Who profits when this place fails, Captain? I asked, ignoring her impatience. Seraphine blinked, thrown off balance. The nobles in the capital profit by removing their enemies. The Crown profits by keeping the monsters below busy. What does it matter to you? You have 3 weeks before the purge. Survive it or die with the rest. I don't want to survive, I said, standing up fully. I wiped the blood from my cheek with the back of my hand, leaving a streak of red across my skin. I want to know who is selling this prison off brick by brick. Show me the map. Not the official one. The real one. She laughed. A short, brittle sound. The map is classified royal property. You are an inmate's pet, Warden. A figurehead for the executioner. I am the warden who decides who deserves to walk out of here, I said, my voice steady, despite the adrenaline hammering in my chest. And right now, everyone here is about to die because you're too busy looking at your boots to see what's coming from below. The torchlight flickered and died, leaving us in near darkness, save for the faint blue glow of my system interface. Active breach, Sector 4, Entity Class, Ash Wolves, Threat Level High. Show me the map, I repeated, stepping past her, or I'll tear this cell block apart stone by stone to find out why you're letting them in. Seraphine hesitated, then signaled the guards to hold their fire. She pulled a parchment from her belt, handing it to me with a scowl. The forge ring, the infirmary, and Dorian Ash's cell. He's scheduled for execution tomorrow. Don't go near him. He's worse than the wolves. I took the map, my eyes scanning the layout. The lines didn't make sense. The paths to the capital were blocked by impossible walls, but there were gaps that aligned with the scratches on the floor.
Dorian Ash.
I muttered.
The hero who failed. He was a traitor.
Seraphine snapped.
He tried to rally the guard. We caught him 3 years ago.
I looked at the cracked pendant in my palm, then at the map. Lead the way, Captain. Let's go see why your traitor is still alive when everyone else is dead. Seraphine led the way down the corridor, her boots splashing heavily in the filth. The air grew colder with every step, smelling of rot and old iron. I followed, clutching the map and the brass pendant, my heart hammering against my ribs. The system hovered at the edge of my vision, a silent judge. Predicted outcome. Capital devoured. We turned a corner into a wider junction. The walls here were scarred with deep gouges, as if something massive had tried to dig its way out. Or in. At the far end of the hall, cell 7113's neighbor stood open, a gaping maw of darkness. Inside, shadows moved.
Stop.
Raising her hand, I stopped. The cold stone bit into my feet.
Behind you.
A pack of ash wolves poured through the breach in the wall behind us, their fur like burning embers, their eyes hollow pits of hunger. There were 6 of them snarling, jaws dripping with black saliva. They fanned out, cutting off our retreat. Seraphine drew her sword, the steel ringing in the damp air. Form up. Tight circle. The guards raised their spears, but their hands shook. One of them dropped his torch, and it rolled into the darkness, extinguishing instantly. The wolves lunged. Dorian Ash, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos.
Where is he?
Seraphine glanced at me, her eyes wide with terror. In the suppression block, 3 halls down. Why? Because he's the only one who knows how to kill them without dying. I shouted over the snarls. I pointed at the corridor leading deeper into the prison. Take us to him. Now. One of the guards screamed as a wolf leaped, teeth snapping inches from his face. He fell back, tripping over a pool of black water. The wolves closed in, circling like sharks in a bloody lake. Move, I yelled, grabbing Seraphine's arm and dragging her forward. She stumbled, but followed her sword carving through the air as we ran. We left the guards to their fate, the sounds of tearing flesh fading behind us. We reached the suppression block, a heavy iron door reinforced with bars thick as tree trunks. Inside, in a small cell illuminated by a single flickering lantern, sat Dorian Ashe. He was chained to a pillar in the center of the room, his wrists bound by cuffs that glowed with faint blue runes. He looked up as we burst in, his eyes tired but sharp. "Another visitor?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse.
Did the wolves miss you? We're out of time for pleasantries.
Breathing hard.
There are wolves behind us. We need to get to the infirmary.
Dorian laughed, a dry, humorless sound. The infirmary? You think you can save anyone? Hellgate is a tomb, lady. And you're just digging your own grave. I'm not asking for your help yet, I said, stepping forward. I held up the cracked brass pendant. I'm offering you a contract. Dorian's eyes narrowed. A what? A contract, I repeated. With me. You protect the infirmary. You hold the line against whatever comes out of that breach. And in exchange, I investigate your case. I find out why a hero is rotting in a cell while monsters feast on his neighbors. Dorian stared at me, skepticism etched into every line of his face. You're the new warden? The boy who woke up in blood? I am, I said, and I have 11 breaches to close before dawn. But first I need your sword. And if I refuse, he asked, leaning back against the pillar. The chains clinked softly. Then we all die here, I said simply, and you die in pain. I've seen this before, Dorian. I've calculated it. Your odds of survival without outside help are less than 4%. Dorian looked at the door, then back at me. He saw the desperation in my eyes, the certainty. Why should I trust you? The Crown lied to me. They erased my name, my deeds, everything. Why would a stranger care? Because the system is broken, I said, stepping closer, and I intend to fix it. But I need you alive to prove it. A howl echoed from the corridor outside. The wolves were close. Too close. Dorian exhaled, a long, slow breath. He looked at his chains, then at me. What's the price? 3 hours of combat freedom, I said. During that time, you answer to no one but me. You have access to any weapon in this block, and if you survive, I pull your file. Every sealed record, every suppressed report. Dorian nodded slowly. He tested his cuffs, then looked at the runes glowing on them. Break these? I can, I said, but I need a mana source. Or blood. He grinned, a fierce, dangerous expression. Then let's make a deal, Warden. If you fail, I eat your heart. And if I succeed, you give me the map to the capital. All of it. Deal, I said, pulling the brass pendant from my pocket. I pressed it against the rune on his cuff. It flared with light, burning my hand but not stopping. The chains loosened, clattering to the floor. Dorian rubbed his wrists, the skin raw and red where the iron had bitten deep. He flexed his fingers, testing the range of motion, then looked up at me with a glare that could have frozen fire.
You burn my hand to break your word.
Holding out his palm, the brass pendant was searing hot, leaving a blister on my skin. But I didn't flinch. If you try to bind me to anything less than full freedom during those 3 hours, I will tear the system apart with my teeth. Keep the fire in your belly, I said, clutching the burning metal until the pain forced it to dull. The runes on his cuffs flickered and died, leaving him free from the pillar but not from the room. Your word is the only chain you need right now. Move, the wolves are at the suppression block door. 3 hours, Dorian corrected, stepping over the clattering chains.
Start counting when we kill the first one, not before. I don't take orders until blood hits the stone. We're bleeding as we speak.
She was reloading her crossbow, her hands trembling so violently she dropped a bolt twice. Just walk, before they break in. Dorian ignored her, his eyes locked on mine. He walked past me, shoulder checking my chest with enough force to knock the wind out of me if I hadn't braced against the wall. He stopped at the threshold of the cell and turned back, looking at the map still clutched in my left hand.
You said you wanted the real map,
His voice low and gravelly.
the one that shows the tunnels. It's right here.
I said, tapping the parchment. Wrong, he said. He pointed a calloused finger at the floor of the suppression cell. Look at the scratches, under the dust. The crown didn't just hide the paths to the capital, they hid the paths out of the capital. Look deeper, Warden. I dropped to my knees, ignoring the filth soaking into my trousers. I scraped away the grime with my thumb, revealing faint, deliberate grooves in the stone floor. They weren't random scratches, they were coordinates, and they pointed directly toward the infirmary.
These aren't escape routes.
Her face pale,
They're feeding chutes. No,
crouching beside me. His proximity smelled of old blood and ozone. What else was it sealed for? I asked, standing up.
because I found out the purge isn't a punishment. It's a buffet.
A deafening crunch of iron echoed from the suppression block door. The heavy bars began to bend inward, groaning under impossible pressure. Dust rained down from the ceiling as the metal twisted like wet clay. "They're coming," Seraphine yelled, raising her crossbow toward the door. "All of them. We have maybe 30 seconds. Then we make them wait," I said. I looked at Dorian. "You said you knew how to kill them without dying." He reached into his tunic and pulled out a jagged shard of black glass, likely torn from his own broken shackle or the wall. It hummed with residual mana.
But I need bait, and you're standing in it. I don't have time for riddles.
She fired her crossbow. The bolt struck the bending door and shattered. The metal groaned louder, splintering further.
I'm not giving you a riddle.
Stepping back into the shadows of the cell.
I'm giving you a lesson. You want to save the infirmary? You need to understand how this prison works. It's built on lies. The walls are weak where the truth is heavy.
He tossed the black glass shard at my feet. It landed with a dull thud, absorbing the ambient light around it. "Pick it up," Dorian commanded. "Why?" I asked.
Because it's the only thing that can cut through their hide. And because if you don't trust me enough to hold a weapon that might kill you, we're already dead.
The door buckled again. A snout pressed through the gap, black and slick with slime, eyes glowing red in the darkness beyond. "Pick it up." Seraphine screamed, backing away until her back hit the far wall. I looked at Dorian. He didn't blink. He just waited, his hand resting on the hilt of a dagger he had pulled from nowhere. "If I pick this up," I said.
I'm agreeing to your terms. You're agreeing to survive. Terms are negotiable after you stop bleeding.
The snout pushed further in, jaws parting to reveal rows of needle-like teeth. Saliva dripped onto the stone, sizzling. "Agreed," I said. I bent down and closed my fingers around the shard. It was cold, colder than ice, and it felt like it was trying to suck the warmth from my hand. At the same time, a shock of power surged up my arm, clear and sharp. Item acquired. Shard of the Null Void. Effect. Can pierce magical suppression fields. Warning, user is now tethered to Dorian Ash. The shard pulsed against my palm, a rhythmic thrumming that matched the pounding of my own heart. It felt like holding a vein of pure silence. I didn't have time to question the sensation. The door screamed as it gave way, metal shearing off its hinges with a sound like tearing canvas. Dorian moved first. He didn't run, he flowed. His body blurred, closing the distance between us and the breach in a single impossible stride. He slammed into the first wolf mid-leap, his dagger finding the gap in the armored scales of its neck. Black blood sprayed across the stone, sizzling where it hit the damp air.
Left. The second one is fast. Don't let it flank.
I didn't think. I reacted with the same instinct that had kept me alive on collapsing bridges and burning skyscrapers. Calculate the trajectory, step aside, survive. I threw myself to the right, rolling under the snapping jaws of the second wolf. The shard in my hand grew hotter, the cold biting back against the heat. Seraphine was screaming something about a third flank, but her voice was lost in the chaos. She scrambled backward, crossbow useless in close quarters, fumbling for a knife at her belt. "Seraphine, stop!" I yelled, my eyes locked on the wolf circling behind Dorian. "It's drawing you in! I'm not leaving him!" she shrieked, finally drawing her blade. She lunged forward, but it was too late. The wolf twisted in midair, its tail whipping out like a steel whip. It caught her across the ribs, sending her sprawling into the wall with a sickening crunch.
Seraphine.
He kicked off the first wolf's chest, using the momentum to spin around and drive his blade deep into the second beast's eye. Black ichor poured from the socket, dissolving the stone floor below. He didn't pause. He spun toward the third wolf, but it was already on him. The beast tackled him, sending them both crashing into the suppression pillar. Chains rattled violently as Dorian struggled beneath the weight of the creature. "Kill it, now, or we're dead." I stood frozen for a fraction of a second. The shard burned my hand, the pain sharp and clear. Move, strike, survive. I ran toward them, toward them. The third wolf snapped at my face, jaws wide enough to take my head off. I didn't dodge. I thrust the shard forward. It passed through the beast's jaw like it was smoke. There was no resistance, no impact, just a sudden, absolute silence as the wolf's body collapsed into dust, blown away by an invisible wind. The other two wolves froze, their heads snapped toward me, red eyes wide with something that looked remarkably like fear. What? Seraphine wheezed from the floor, clutching her side. Her face was gray, sweat mixing with the blood on her forehead. "What are you?" I held up the shard. It glowed with a faint blue light now. "And you're trespassing." Dorian shoved the remaining wolf off him, rolling to his feet. He didn't look at me. "You didn't cut them," he said, breathless. "Does it matter?" I asked. The shard's heat was fading, replaced by a cold numbness in my hand. "They're dead. That's what counts." Dorian finally looked at me. His eyes were dark, calculating. He wiped blood from his cheek with the back of his hand. "Because if you can erase them, you can erase us. All of us. The prisoners, the guards, even the thing below. Everyone who enters Hellgate kills someone," Dorian countered. "The question is who chooses when." He walked over to Seraphine, crouching beside her. "She's alive," he announced. "Ribs are cracked, maybe punctured. She'll survive if she stops bleeding. Help her up," I ordered. It wasn't a request. I needed every pair of eyes that could see. Dorian didn't move immediately. He looked at me, his gaze hardening. "I'm helping the prisoner,"
She's part of the security detail.
I said.
Then secure her yourself.
He stood up, towering over me.
Or leave her. We don't have time for charity. The wolves were just scouts. They won't be alone for long.
I looked at Seraphine. She didn't move to help herself. She waited. For Dorian? Or for me? "Get up, Captain," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "You have a job to do." Seraphine glared at me, then spat blood onto the floor. She pushed herself up, wincing as she put weight on her injured side. She leaned against the wall, nodding sharply. "I'll follow you," she said, through gritted teeth. But if this goes south, I'm hanging you first." Dorian stepped between us, his chains rattling like dry bones. "Stop posturing. The wolves are gone, but the tunnel is open. Do you want to see what's coming?" "I know what's coming," I said, gripping the shard until my knuckles turned white.
And I need your eyes for it.
A harsh barking sound.
My eyes are bound by law and iron. You have none of that here. What do you offer the man who has nothing left to lose?
"I offer investigation," I said. "Your case file is sealed, but if we survive the next hour, I tear it open." Dorian's smile vanished. He stared at me, searching for a lie. "Why help me?" "Because you're right about one thing," I said. "This prison works on lies. I'm here to audit them." The shard in my hand pulsed, cold and sharp. Dorian looked at the breach, then back at me. He saw the calculation in my eyes, the same look I'd worn when signing off on demolition orders back on Earth. "You're a monster," he whispered. "I'm an investigator," I corrected, "and you're my first asset." The blood was cold against Elias's cheek, slick and iron-scented, mixing with the black rainwater that pooled in the cracked stone of Hellgate's upper ring. Alarms screamed, a mechanical shriek that vibrated through his ribs, but his vision was narrow, focused on the brass pendant pressing into his palm. It was warm, pulsing faintly, the only thing not dead in this section of the cell block. "Get up, noble." Captain Seraphine Vale stood over him, her armor dented, her face smeared with soot and older blood behind her. 6 guards fanned out, rifles raised, eyes wide with the panic of men who expected to die before breakfast. They did not see Elias Rook. They saw another court-appointed warden, a silk-clad fool sent by the crown to bleed out alongside the rest of them. Elias pushed himself up. His joints popped, stiff from days of sleeping in corners and nights of staring at ceilings. He wiped the blood from his eyes and looked at the corpse hanging from cell 7113. The system, Hellgate Warden System, a prison management Litrpg system that rewards containment, rehabilitation, leverage, and order rather than raw combat power. Elias gains authority by resolving crises without uncontrolled casualties. Warden authority confirmed. Elias Rook, cell 7133. Occupant record has been falsified by royal seal.
Your keys are gone.
Her voice was tight, professional, but it cracked on the last word. The breaches are 11 strong. The nearest one contains Dorian Ash. He is scheduled for execution tomorrow. You can either die with your dignity or die trying to run. Elias stood, his legs shaky but holding. He looked at the map floating in his mind's eye, the official prison layout that showed safe paths and secure walls. It was a lie. The system overlaid a new truth. Tunnels leading toward the capital, hidden by royal seals, deliberately obscured to hide what the crown had done.
I have a better idea.
His voice was rough, unused to command, but steady.
Show me who profits when this place fails.
Seraphine blinked. The guards shifted, their rifles wavering.
Profits? You are in Hellgate. Everyone here is dying. Then we are all losing assets.
He looked at the cracked brass pendant. It was not a key. It was a contract token.
Lead me to Dorian Ash. If he is innocent, as the system suggests, he is an asset I do not want. Wasted on a firing squad.
A harsh barking sound.
Innocent? He betrayed the crown. He sold border villages to monsters. That is the charge.
The system confirmed it instantly. Containment alert. The bone choir has consumed 2 guards. 2 screams echoed from the corridor below, sudden and wet. If you want to die for your king, go ahead. I have a week to survive, and I need to know who is eating us while we bleed. Seraphine stared at him. For a long moment, the alarms seemed quieter, or perhaps her hearing was just dulling from fear. Then she lowered her rifle slightly.
Follow me. But if you try anything, I am unarmed.
He touched the pendant. It hummed against his skin.
I rely on leverage.
They moved down the corridor, the stone groaning under their feet. The air smelled of ozone and rotting meat. Every step was a negotiation with gravity, with fear, with the sheer improbability that Elias Rook, disaster insurance investigator, was now the warden of Hellgate. He had spent his life calculating which cities could be saved and which had to be abandoned. Now, he was in the city that could not be saved. Authority permits, cell inspections, contracts, sentence revisions, labor assignments, security upgrades, and limited dungeon reshaping. Warning: order obtained through terror creates a debt. Debt will eventually be collected. Dorian Ash's cell was shattered. The door hung off its hinges, twisted by claws the size of scythes. Inside, chains rattled. A massive man was bound to a suppression pillar, his skin marked with scars that glowed faintly. Blue. He was not looking at Elias. He was looking at the hole in the floor where something had clawed through from below.
Elias Rook.
His voice was deep, resonant, like stones grinding together.
The crown sent a calculator to stop a war. I send results.
He walked into the cell, ignoring the guards' gasps. The system highlighted the chains. Contract option available. Offer conditional freedom in exchange for one impossible service. Dorian laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. You think you can bargain with me? I have spent 3 years preventing monsters from tunneling into the infirmary corridor. 3 years holding back the tide while your kings counted their gold. The words fell out of him, dictated by the system's revelation. System exposes his sealed file. Dorian Ash discovered that royal generals sold border villages to monsters so the crown could justify emergency taxes.
The crown erased you before you could speak.
Dorian's eyes snapped to Elias. They were gray, sharp, and filled with a rage so hot it felt like heat.
So what? You are here to confirm my death sentence? Am I here to confirm it?
He stepped closer to the suppression pillar, his boots crunching on glass shards that sparkled like diamonds under the flickering emergency lights. I am here to audit your value. Dorian's neck strained against the heavy iron cuffs. the metal groaning as he shifted his weight. Value? To whom? The crown does not value heroes. It values convenient monsters. He reached out, his fingers brushing the cold chain that bound Dorian's wrists to the pillar. The system pulsed against his palm, a cold numerical certainty. Contract option available. Offer conditional freedom in exchange for one impossible service. And right now, their control is slipping through the cracks in this floor. One of Seraphine's guards whimpered.
Warden, we cannot hold the breach much longer. The bone choir is vocalizing. If it gets loud, the structural integrity fails. Then stop talking and start praying. I do not need a weapon, Dorian. Weapons get discarded when they break. I need a man with a reason to return.
Dorian stared at him. The rage in his gray eyes dimmed, replaced by a wary calculation.
Why would I help the machine that tried to erase me? Because children are trapped behind the next gate.
He pointed toward the tunnel leading deeper into the infirmary sector. The system highlighted the path in red. Containment alert. Non-combatants detected in Sector 4. Evacuation probability, 12%. They do not know your name, Dorian. They only know the monsters that want them for dinner. You can die here, or you can live long enough to tell them why they should be afraid of their masters, not just their prey. Dorian let out a breath that fogged in the cold air.
A combat contract? You think I will fight because you offer me paperwork? I offer you leverage.
He pulled the cracked brass pendant from his pocket and held it up. The light caught the fractures, making it look like a spiderweb of gold. Temporary authority. You protect the infirmary corridor for 6 hours. In return, I investigate your case. If the system confirms your innocence, which it already has, you walk. If it does not, you stay. No appeals. No execution until review. Dorian laughed again, but this time there was a hint of wonder in it.
You are insane. You think the crown will honor that? The crown is dead.
He tapped the pendant against his own chest, right over his heart.
We are building something new here. Something that requires order, not obedience.
Contract accepted, Dorian Ashe. Term, 6 hours. Condition, protect infirmary corridor. Prison integrity, 18%, 23%. Authority action available. Labor assignment. The chains clanked loudly as they loosened, the magic of the system dissolving the restraints one link at a time. Dorian flexed his wrists, testing the range of motion, then stood up to his full height. He was taller than Elias had expected, broad-shouldered and scarred, but he moved with a predatory grace that betrayed his years in confinement.
6 hours.
Rubbing his bruised wrists.
If I fail, you let the bone choir take me? If you fail, you die. But if you succeed, I give you the truth about your conviction, and I give you a seat at the table.
Seraphine stepped forward, her rifle still raised but lowered now.
Warden, this is highly irregular. He is a Class A treasonous prisoner. He is a temporary asset. Write it down if it helps you sleep. Now, Dorian, the infirmary. Go.
Dorian did not hesitate. He turned toward the breach in the floor, his body tense, muscles coiling like springs. Before he dropped into the darkness, he looked back at Elias.
You want a man with a reason to return. You have one. But do not think this makes us friends, Rook. Friendship is a luxury. I deal in contracts.
Dorian grinned, a sharp, dangerous expression. Then let us see if your ink holds water. He leaped into the breach, disappearing into the gloom just as the first screech of the bone choir echoed. Up from below, Elias exhaled slowly. The system chimed, a soft melodic sound that felt alien in the chaos. Dungeon reshaping available. Reinforce Corridor 7. Cost, 50 mana. Benefit, plus 10% structural integrity.
Mana?
He looked at his hands. They were steady now. The exhaustion was still there, a heavy blanket over his bones, but the panic had vanished. He had survived his first hour by doing exactly what he always did in disaster zones: triage. Save the most valuable assets, cut the dead weight, build a perimeter.
Captain, get me to the ration vaults, now.
Seraphine lowered her rifle completely.
The vaults are locked, Warden. Only the quartermaster has the codes. The quartermaster is stealing from us.
He began walking toward the elevator shaft, his steps firm.
And I intend to audit him.
Sir. Seraphine fell into step beside him, her boots clicking on the stone. The middle rings are starving if they... The elevator doors groaned open, revealing a rusted cage that smelled of ozone and old blood. Elias stepped inside, ignoring the way Seraphine's hand drifted toward her sidearm. The lift shuddered, lifting them upward into the gloom of the middle rings. Below them, the screams of the dying grew fainter, replaced by a low collective rumble, the sound of thousands of hungry men and women realizing they were being fed lies.
The ledgers say we have a month's worth of grain.
Her eyes fixed on the rising floor numbers.
The quartermaster is honest. He would never.
Let me see the ledger, Elias interrupted. He didn't look at her. He watched his own reflection in the darkened glass of the elevator wall. His face was pale, drawn tight over his skull, but his eyes were cold, analytical. They were the eyes of a man who had signed off on entire neighborhoods to save a hospital. I don't have physical access, Seraphine stammered, her hand falling back to her side.
Only the quartermaster can update the inventory from his office in the upper spire. Then bring me to his office, and bring your rifle. If he has stolen food while this place burns, he is not a bureaucrat. He is an enemy combatant.
The elevator reached its destination with a harsh clang. The doors opened onto a corridor lined with velvet drapes that had seen better centuries. The air here was thick with the scent of lavender and decay. At the end of the hall, a heavy oak door stood ajar, spilling warm candlelit light into the cold stone hallway. Elias pushed past Seraphine. She hesitated, then followed, her boots silent on the plush carpet that masked the grime beneath. Inside, the room was a paradox of luxury and squalor. Expensive tapestries covered walls stained with black mold, a table laden with half-eaten delicacies. Grapes, cheese, wine sat in the center. Around it, 6 women in tailored suits sat in silence, their faces masks of bored anticipation. Vera Knox sat at the head of the table. She was slim, sharp-featured, with hair like spilled ink and eyes that seemed to see through skin to bone. She did not stand as Elias entered. She merely swirled her wine, watching him with the detached interest of a cat watching a trapped bird.
Warden.
Her voice was smooth, like silk dragged over gravel.
You are late. The rats in the lower tunnels are getting bold. I am here to audit your accounts.
He walked to the table and placed his hand on the spread of food. His fingers hovered over a wheel of brie that looked impossibly fresh. Vera smiled, a slow, predatory curve of her lips. And what do you find? Theft? Discrepancy, Elias corrected. He pulled the cracked brass pendant from his pocket. It pulsed with a faint blue light. Resource audit complete. Food reserves falsified. Actual reserves, 4%. Ledgers claim 100%.
You have 40% of the prison's food supply in this room, and you are selling it to the highest bidder. We are redistributing resources.
Taking a sip of wine.
Efficiently, the quartermaster is clumsy. He leaves trails. I leave shadows. There is a difference. There is also a riot brewing in Ring 5. They know their rations are empty. They are coming for the guard lifts next, and when they get there, they will kill your guards. Your precious velvet knives will die because you thought it was clever to sit on gold while the world burned.
Vera's smile faded. Her eyes narrowed. And what do you propose, Warden? Do you expect me to open the vaults out of charity?
I expect you to open the vaults because your network is about to be starved.
Elias said. He leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous.
You have routes, smuggling paths into the upper spire?
Vera tilted her head.
I have many paths. Some lead to gold, some lead to power. Why should I give you what I can sell for a fortune? Because if Hellgate falls, your fortune is ash.
He straightened up.
I am offering a contract, not a request, a binding agreement.
Contract option available. Offer conditional freedom in exchange for one impossible service. Vera laughed softly.
A contract? From you? How quaint. You think the system binds me? I have made contracts with devils who would sell their own mothers for a second chance. What could you possibly offer that holds weight? I can give you truth.
He tapped the pendant again. The blue light intensified, illuminating the wrinkles around Vera's eyes. I can look at your sealed file. I can tell you exactly why you were sent here. How you were framed. Why the crown wants you buried. Vera went still. For the first time, her composure cracked. A flicker of genuine fear passed through her eyes.
My file is sealed by royal decree. Even the system cannot, the system can, because I am the warden, and I have authority. You want to survive this prison? You need to know who your enemy is. You need to know why you are here.
Vera stared at him for a long moment. The candlelight danced in her dark eyes, reflecting something like calculation. Then,
Truth is expensive.
her voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the hum of the ventilation fans, she leaned back in her chair, crossing one leg over the other with deliberate slowness. The movement was casual, but her eyes remained locked on Elias's face, searching for any sign of hesitation.
Then stop selling it to the people who can already afford lies.
He did not blink. He kept his hand resting on the table, his fingers tapping a slow, rhythmic beat against the polished wood. It was a gesture he had used in boardrooms when he wanted to force a counterpart to fill the silence. Vera's smile returned, but it was thinner now, stripped of its earlier warmth.
You think you can regulate blackmail, Warden? You are new here. You do not understand the economy of this place. I understand supply and demand. Right now, information is the only currency that matters, and I hold the mint.
He tapped the brass pendant again. The light flared, casting long, jagged shadows across the tapestries. Here is my offer. I will give you one truthful answer about your conviction for every 10 inmates your network feeds without violence. No murders, no intimidation. Just bread, just water, just truth. Vera blinked, once, twice. She looked down at her wine glass, swirling the dark liquid as if reading the future in its depths. One answer per 10 lives? That is a steep price for secrets. It is cheap, Elias countered. Consider what you are saving. The Bone Choir does not distinguish between guards and inmates. If Ring 5 storms the lifts, they will break into this room too. My contract ensures their survival. Yours guarantees their hunger. Vera set her glass down with a sharp click. She looked at the women around her. They were silent, watching Elias with a mixture of fear and curiosity. And if I refuse?
Then you watch your organization starve while I rebuild this prison from scratch.
Vera stood up. She walked around the table, her heels clicking softly on the carpet. She stopped directly in front of Elias, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of lavender and old paper that clung to her clothes.
You are very confident for a man who woke up in a pool of blood an hour ago. I am very confident because I have nowhere else to go.
He held her gaze, refusing to look away. Vera's jaw tightened, her hand twitched toward the dagger at her belt, but she stopped herself. Instead, she reached out and touched the pendant Elias had placed on the table. Her fingers brushed his skin. It was cold. The choice is yours. Contract or collapse. Vera pulled her hand back and turned away. She walked to the window, looking out at the storm that raged beyond the stone walls. The thunder shook the floorboards beneath their feet. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she spoke, her voice flat.
My network feeds 300 inmates in Ring 5 tomorrow morning.
If one of them dies by violence caused by my agents, the contract is void. Do you understand? I understand.
He felt a shift in the air, a subtle change in pressure that he recognized from the system's earlier warnings. He had just negotiated with death, and he had won a sliver of ground.
And I will provide the first truth in exchange for the first 10 bodies saved. Very well.
She turned back to him, her expression unreadable.
That is acceptable.
He picked up the pendant and slipped it back into his pocket. The blue light faded, leaving the room in dim candlelight once more. Now, show me the roots. I want to see where the food goes when it leaves this room. Vera nodded to one of her agents, a slender woman with pale hair and cold eyes. The agent stepped forward and placed a rolled parchment on the table. It was a map, detailed and annotated in Vera's neat handwriting. Elias studied the map, his eyes tracing the lines of tunnels and shafts. He recognized the layout of Hellgate's underbelly from his briefings before, but this was different. This was alive. It breathed with the secrets of those who had been here before.
I will need a team. Take Seraphine.
Vera suggested. She sat back down, picking up her wine again. She trusts you, or she pretends to. Either way, she is useful. But leave your friends behind. The quartermaster has guards loyal only to gold. He rolled the map and tucked it under his arm. But I have authority. And that is enough. He turned to leave, but Vera's voice stopped him. Warden, she called. Elias woke face down in blood and black rainwater outside, cell 7113, while alarms shook Hellgate's upper ring. His predecessor's corpse hung from the cell door with every key missing except a cracked brass pendant pressed into Elias's palm. He pushed himself up, his fingers slipping on the wet stone, the taste of copper thick in his mouth. The air smelled of ozone and rot. Captain Vale arrived with 6 guards, her boots clanking against the iron grating as she approached him like he was just another noble who had lost his way to survival.
If you have a final prayer, make it quick.
Elias studied the map in his mind, the one the system had forced into his memory, and answered, "I have a better idea. Show me who profits when this place fails." Seraphine stared at him, her expression unreadable behind the grime on her face. She didn't move closer. The guards fanned out, spears raised, their eyes darting to the shadows where the breach had torn through the wall. One of them, a young man with a twitching eye, whispered something to his neighbor but kept his weapon steady.
You're dead either way, Rook. The breaches are opening faster than we can seal them. The Crown doesn't care if you live or die as long as the perimeter holds.
Elias stood up, wiping blood from his cheek with the back of his hand. He held out the brass pendant. It was warm to the touch, humming faintly with a power that felt alien yet familiar.
The Crown cares about order, and order requires someone who can see where the cracks are. I see them.
One of the guards stepped forward, lowering his spear slightly. He looked at Elias, then at Seraphine, uncertainty rippling across his face. He didn't speak, but his hesitation was loud enough in the silence between the alarms. Seraphine turned to him sharply. "Stand down, Private. You're out of your depth." The guard hesitated, then nodded stiffly, stepping back into formation. But his eyes lingered on Elias a second too long. Elias ignored him, focusing on Seraphine. "You said the perimeter holds. Which perimeter? The official one or the real one?" Seraphine's jaw tightened. She knew what he was asking. She also knew that admitting the truth could get her court-martialed if not executed. But looking at Elias, seeing the strange calm in his eyes despite the chaos around them, she made a choice.
The official map is wrong. It's been altered for decades. The Crown hides paths leading toward the capital to keep the public from knowing how close the darkness is.
Elias felt the system click into action. System alert, 11 simultaneous breaches detected. Nearest breach contains prisoners scheduled for execution tomorrow. Dorian Ashe, legendary hero accused of treason. Dorian Ashe.
Where is he? Cell 9004. He's chained to the suppression pillar. The guards refuse to move him because they say his presence stabilizes the local wards.
Magic we don't understand. Blood magic, maybe. Dorian's file is sealed tighter than his cell. But he's not alone in the dark down there. Elias began walking toward the corridor, Seraphine and her guards falling into step behind him. He didn't ask for permission to lead. He just took the path that led away from the alarms and toward the truth. As they moved deeper into Hellgate, the air grew colder, the screams of dying men grew louder, mixed with the guttural growls of things that had no names. Elias focused on the system's overlay, highlighting the structural weaknesses in the walls, the flow of mana, and the locations of every threat. A voice cut through the din, smooth as velvet and sharp as a knife. Vera Knox stepped out from the shadows of an alcove, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed. She wore a prisoner's gray tunic, but she carried herself like a queen surveying her court. Her eyes locked onto Elias, then flicked to Seraphine.
The iron mantles escorting a dead man? How quaint.
Seraphine tensed, her hand drifting to the hilt of her sword. "Vera, you're out of your cell." Vera smiled, showing teeth that looked too white in the dim light. "I'm everywhere, Captain. Secrets have a way of slipping through cracks. Like those breaches you're so fond of ignoring." She turned her gaze back to Elias. "And you, Warden, or whatever title the system is forcing on you now. You think you can fix this place with a pendant and a prayer?" Elias stopped walking. He looked at Vera, then at Seraphine, then at the guards who were watching the exchange with growing unease.
I think that I'm about to find out if this place is worth saving.
Vera laughed, a low, dangerous sound. "Oh, Warden." Vera leaned back against the damp stone, her fingers tracing the edge of a hidden pocket in her tunic. "Worth saving is a question for the living, Warden. The dead are already spent." She tilted her head, studying Elias with the predatory curiosity of a hawk watching a field mouse scramble. "But you have the look of a man who counts his coins before he buys his bread. That makes you dangerous. Or useful, depending on which side of the table I'm sitting on." Elias did not blink. The system's interface flickered at the edge of his vision, red warning icons pulsing over the darkness ahead. I don't care about sides, Vera. I care about structural integrity. And right now, Hellgate is collapsing from the inside out. You know why? Vera's smile didn't waver, but her eyes sharpened.
Because the Crown forgot to pay the bills? Or because the monsters broke their toys? Both?
He took a step forward, forcing Vera to tilt her head back slightly to maintain eye contact. The height difference was negligible, but the weight of his authority was not. The wards are failing, the breaches are widening, and you know exactly who is pulling the strings from the capital because you've spent years collecting their secrets like loose change. Seraphine stepped between them, her hand resting on her sword hilt. Her face was a mask of cold fury. Stay back from the warden, Knox. He has no time for your riddles. Vera chuckled, a soft, dry sound like leaves skittering across pavement. Relax, Captain. I'm not here to bite. I'm here to offer a hand, or at least a map. She reached into her tunic and pulled out a folded piece of parchment, stained with wine and something darker. She tossed it to Elias. He caught it one-handed, his eyes scanning the familiar script. It was a sector map of the lower levels, but unlike the official records, this one had annotations in a cramped, frantic hand. Red lines connected safe zones to dead ends. Black ink crossed out patrol routes, and in the center, circled repeatedly, was the forge ring.
The Iron Mantles think the breaches are random acts of nature. They're wrong. Someone is guiding them. The Bone Choir isn't just screaming for attention. They're singing a lockpick song, and if that ring doesn't wake up soon, Hellgate won't just break open. It will be erased.
Why tell me? You could sell this to the highest bidder in the royal court. Vera shrugged, her shoulders rolling with casual grace.
Because if Hellgate falls, my debtors fall too. And I have a very long list of people who owe me favors. Do you really want to be responsible for bankrupting half the nobility? Where is this ring? Past the maw chamber.
Her voice dropping to a whisper.
Held by the choir. They're not monsters, Warden. They're victims, and they're very, very loud.
Before Elias could press her further, Dorian Ash's voice boomed from the corridor ahead. It was deep, resonant, and carried the weight of a man who had commanded armies.
Is he listening to you? Or is he just taking notes for his own funeral?
Elias turned to see Dorian emerging from the shadows of cell 9004. He was massive, his muscles corded with years of confinement, chains rattling around his wrists as he moved. Despite the restraints, he moved with the grace of a predator. His eyes were cold, assessing Elias not as an ally, but as a variable in a complex equation.
You think you can fix this place with scraps? With secrets from a spy who sells her soul by the ounce?
Seraphine stepped forward, her spear tip level with Dorian's chest. Dorian laughed, a harsh barking sound.
You're running out of time, Rook. The purge starts at midnight. By then, either you'll have the forge ring lit, or you'll be dead. And I won't wait for your corpse to cool.
Elias looked at the map in his pocket, then at the dark corridor leading toward the maw chamber.
Show me the way, but you ride shotgun, and you don't swing anything until I say so.
You don't give orders to me. He reached out and tapped the brass pendant against his own palm. Once. The sound was sharp, definitive. I do now. It's in the contract. Then Dorian grunted, a short, abrupt exhalation of air through his nose.
Fine. But if you slow me down, I leave you behind. And let the choir have their fun.
I knew you had it in you, Warden. The hunger. It smells like ozone and cheap wine. She pushed off the wall, her movements fluid as oil sliding over water. Don't forget our arrangement, Rook. If this ring lights up, I want first dibs on the prisoner lists. And by lists, I mean the ones that will burn the crown to ash. Elias turned his back on her, signaling Seraphine with a flick of his wrist. Keep her in sight. If she tries to sell the forge ring coordinates to anyone else, shoot her. Just don't miss the lungs. Her sword was already half drawn, the steel singing a quiet threat. Understood, Warden. Dorian started walking, his chains clanking with a rhythmic oppressive weight that echoed down the corridor. Elias fell into step beside him, ignoring the glare of the iron mantles behind them. The air grew colder as they descended, the temperature dropping with every step toward the maw chamber. Elias asked, keeping his voice low so the guards behind them wouldn't overhear.
I don't hate you, Rook. I hate the crown, and you're the only one holding a knife sharp enough to cut their throats. Don't confuse utility with friendship. Friendship is expensive, utility is cheap. It's the same price when the bill comes due.
Dorian replied. He stopped abruptly, turning to face Elias. Up close he smelled of iron and old blood. You think you can bargain with death? The Bone Choir isn't a faction. It's a wound that won't heal. They're screaming because they're still alive inside the bone. Elias pulled up the system interface. The screen flooded with red text overlaying his vision like a hemorrhage. Warndoing. Mana depletion critical. Location, Maw chamber approaching. Faction detected. Bone Choir. Undead necrotic colony. Threat level, extreme.
Then let's stop the screaming.
He tapped the screen, forcing the interface to minimize so he could see Dorian's face clearly. Dorian's jaw tightened, his hands clenched into fists, the chains straining against his wrists. Project Aurelian. The Crown tried to fuse soul-bound artillery with living matter. They wanted soldiers who couldn't die, who couldn't quit. They took hundreds of political prisoners, dissidents, rebels, people who knew too much, and they poured them into a crucible. When the process failed, it didn't kill them, it trapped them. All together, one mind, one scream, and the forge ring? If the furnace dies, they break. If they break, everything below us turns to ash. But if we light it, we give them control. We give a graveyard a voice. The corridor opened into a massive chamber, vast enough to house a cathedral. In the center stood the forge ring, a colossal ring of dormant metal and glass tubes, dark and cold. Surrounding it were hundreds of figures, pale, translucent, fused together by spikes of bone and wire. They moved in unison, a single organism of flesh and calcified terror. Their mouths were open in silent screams, but the sound hit Elias like a physical blow, a high-pitched resonant wail that vibrated in his teeth. Elias staggered back, clutching his head. The system screamed warnings in his peripheral vision, scrolling too fast to read. Notice, collective consciousness detected, psychic resonance, pain-based binding agent, intervention required, stabilize frequency or collapse entity.
Look at them.
Dorian said, his voice barely audible over the psychic pressure.
They're not monsters. They're just
Stuck.
waiting for someone to notice.
Vera slipped past the guards, appearing at Elias's shoulder like a shadow given form. She didn't touch him, but her presence was cold. The speaker is ahead, she whispered. Don't promise mercy, Warden. Promise leverage. Mercy is for the dead. We need business. Elias stepped forward, raising his hands to show he held no weapon. He forced himself to stand tall, to ignore the pain that threatened to crack his mind. He walked toward the central mass of fused bodies. At the front stood a figure slightly larger than the rest, its face a mask of fused bone and glassy eyes. It didn't speak with a mouth. The voice formed directly in Elias's skull, a chorus of thousands speaking in unison. Warden, the voice boomed, shaking the dust from the ceiling. Elias swallowed hard. His throat felt like sandpaper. I come to negotiate. A ripple of amusement passed through the choir, a shudder that made the nearby guards stumble back in fear. Elias kept his hands raised, palms open, showing the empty calluses of a man who had spent his life calculating risk rather than delivering blows. Release is off the table. You're not going anywhere until the wards are active, but I can give you what keeps that pain from tearing your minds apart. The forge ring. It's dormant, it's hungry. If I light it, it feeds on mana, but it stabilizes bone. It stops the screaming. Dorian stepped out from behind Elias, his chains clanking against the obsidian floor. He didn't look at the choir, he looked at the massive dark furnace in the center of the chamber,
He's telling the truth.
his voice carrying easily over the psychic static.
We found the schematic in the warden's quarters. The ring was built by Aurelian's engineers before they purged the project. It's designed to bind chaotic souls. If you kill us now, the backlash will crack the foundation of Hellgate. Seraphine will die with the rest of them.
Seraphine shifted her weight, her spear tip dipping slightly as she weighed the threat against the structural integrity of the prison. She didn't draw her weapon, but her knuckles were white on the grip.
The structural analysis holds, Dorian. If they go mad, they take the West Wing with them. Then what do you want?
Her voice cutting through the wail like a scalpel. She leaned against a pillar of fused rib cages, looking bored but alert. You don't give heat to ghosts for free. Everyone knows that. Even in death. The speaker's gaze fixed on Vera, then slid back to Elias. The wailing rose in pitch, a needle driven into the base of Elias's skull. He flinched, fighting the urge to fall to his knees. For 3 years, we have sang the names of our killers in the dark. But the names are echoes. They fade. We need the names that still breathe. The names that ordered the purge. Elias felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He had seen the files. He had smelled the corruption in the air of the noble districts before he woke up here.
You want names.
His voice steady despite the shaking in his legs.
Names of who sent you down there. Who signed the orders?
Yes.
The sound was a chorus of grinding stones.
We are a graveyard without headstones. Give us the list. Make it bound. Make it law.
Dorian shook his head, looking at Elias with disbelief.
Are you insane? If you release those names, the generals, the dukes, the crown's own advisors, they will burn the kingdom to get them out. You're not stabilizing them. You're armoring a revolt. I'm buying time.
Not taking his eyes off the speaker.
And I'm buying the Forge Ring. Without it, Hellgate collapses in 48 hours. The purge begins anyway. This way, we live to see who gets burned.
Vera pushed off the pillar, walking closer until she was within arm's reach of Elias. She didn't touch him, but her eyes gleamed with predatory interest.
He's right about one thing, Warden.
The names are valuable. More valuable than mana. More valuable than food. But you can't just say them. The crown has wards against speech, against writing, against memory. Then I'll make it a contract.
He pulled the cracked brass pendant from his pocket. It hummed, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. The system binds all entities within Hellgate. If I write the names into a binding directive, they become part of the dungeon's architecture. They can't be erased. They can't be hidden. The choir surged forward, a tide of pale flesh and bone. The guards behind Elias raised their shields, shouting in fear, but Seraphine held up a hand.
Wait.
Her voice was sharp enough to cut the panic. Let him speak. What is the prize? The speaker asked. The pain in Elias's head spiked, a white-hot rod driving through his temple. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to breathe.
The furnace heat. You get thermal stability. Your bones stop breaking. You stop feeling the cold of the void. In exchange, you clear the path to the Forge Ring, and you guard it until I have the wards active.
Guard us. The voice was confused, a ripple of dissonance moving through the colony. We are not soldiers. We are mourners. You are what is left of soldiers. Dorian corrected him, his voice hard. And you are the only ones who can stand in that ring without melting. Accept it. Silence stretched across the chamber, heavy and suffocating. The wailing softened to a low hum, a vibration that rattled Elias's teeth. He could feel the desperation radiating from them, not just pain, but a profound, terrifying loneliness. They were connected, yes, but they were also trapped, isolated in their unity. What of the names? Vera pressed her. Elias Rook woke face down in blood and black rainwater outside cell 71113, while alarms shook Hellgate's upper ring. His predecessor's corpse hung from the cell door with every key missing except a cracked brass pendant pressed into his palm. Inside the open cell, something had clawed through stone from below. Captain Vale arrived with 6 guards and assumed Elias was another court-appointed noble about to die. The system identified 11 simultaneous breaches and revealed that the nearest one contained a prisoner scheduled for execution tomorrow, Dorian Ashe, the legendary hero accused of treason. Elias rolled onto his back, wiping grit from his eyes. He looked up at Seraphine, who stood over him with her hand on her sword hilt. Her armor was scarred, her expression cold and professional. She did not offer a hand. She waited for him to prove he belonged there before she considered him useful. He looked at Seraphine.
I have a better idea. Show me who profits when this place fails.
Seraphine did not move for a long moment. Her eyes narrowed as she processed the absurdity of the request. A disaster insurance investigator asking for profit margins in the middle of a massacre was an insult to her duty. But the alarms were screaming, and the blood on Elias's face was real. She signaled the guards to hold their fire.
You think this is a ledger?
This is Hellgate. People are dying. People always die.
Sitting up slowly, the pendant dug into his skin.
I want to know who survives and why. Start with the supply lines. Who buys the weapons that break through our walls?
Seraphine exhaled sharply through her nose. She turned away from him and walked toward one of the guards. Captain's order, she called out, her voice cutting through the din. Bring me the latest requisition logs for the lower rings. Every purchase of iron, every shipment of grain. The guard nodded and ran off into the shadows. Seraphine looked back at Elias. 10 minutes, she said. If you try anything else, I will hang you from that same door. Elias stood up, brushing blood from his coat, and Dorian Ashe, chained in a cell that was supposed to hold nothing but silence. He walked past Seraphine, toward the inner sanctum of the upper ring. Elias found Dorian Ashe's cell door ajar, the hinges torn from their sockets. The corridor beyond was dark, smelling of ash and old sweat. He stepped inside. Dorian lay chained to a suppression pillar in the center of the shattered room. His arms were bound by iron bands that glowed with faint magical runes. He looked up as Elias entered, his eyes sharp despite the grime on his face.
You're late.
I expected an executioner, not a cleaner. I'm neither.
He stopped 3 paces from the pillar.
I'm the warden, which means I have authority over your death warrant.
Dorian laughed, a harsh barking sound.
Authority? You have nothing but a cracked pendant and a dead predecessor's blood on your boots. The crown sent you to die here, just like they sent me. We are both corpses waiting for the ground to settle. Maybe, but I'm not letting them take you quietly. Not yet.
Dorian tilted his head, studying Elias with a predator's curiosity.
You want a weapon? No, weapons get discarded. I want a man with a reason to return.
Dorian stared at him, the silence stretched, heavy and tense. Then the ground shook violently as another breach occurred deeper in the prison. Dust rained from the ceiling. Dorian flinched, his chains clinking loudly.
The ash wolves,
Looking toward the dark corridor behind him.
they're pouring through the infirmary gap. If they break through here, they'll reach the children's wing, the ones trapped in the holding pens.
He also knew that if Dorian died, the crown could claim he had escaped. And without Dorian, Elias would have no proof of the conspiracy.
I can offer a temporary combat contract. Protect the infirmary corridor for 48 hours. Keep the wolves back. In return, I will investigate your case.
Dorian's eyes narrowed. He looked at the chains binding him, then at Elias.
And if I agree, what do I get? Freedom? No. Justice. And a seat on the council. If you help me hold this place together, you help yourself. But you must sign the contract in system law. No loopholes.
Dorian considered this. He looked at the dark tunnel where the monsters were gathering. He thought of the children he had sworn to protect even in defeat. Slowly, he nodded.
Draft it. But if you betray me, I will break these chains and strangle you with my bare hands.
I wouldn't expect anything less. I wouldn't expect anything less.
Closing his eyes as the system's blue light flooded his vision, the air hummed with the sudden weight of binding law. Contract accepted. Dorian Ashe, temporary combat engagement. Objective: secure infirmary corridor A through gate 4. Duration 48 hours. Reward: case review pending purge decree. Dorian pulled at his chains. The iron bands flared bright gold, then settled into a dull, respectful gray. The suppression runes dimmed. Good, he said, his voice rough but steady. Now get out of my cell before the pack gets hungry. Elias turned on his heel and walked back into the corridor. He didn't look back. He knew Dorian would fight. Men with reasons to return fought harder than men who had nothing to lose. Elias moved toward the administrative hub, his mind racing through the logistics of a collapsing fortress. He needed supplies. He needed authority. He needed to stop the bleeding before the crown could finish it. He reached the main hall where Captain Vale was waiting. Her face was pale, her jaw set tight. She held a scroll case in one hand and a dagger in the other. The guards around her were restless, their eyes darting toward the shadows of the upper ring.
Did you secure him?
She didn't lower her guard. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger mechanism of her crossbow.
I secured him.
He stopped 10 paces from her.
And I need your help, Captain. The crown is lying to us. They're not just letting Hellgate fall. They're timing it.
Seraphine's eyes flicked to the scroll case she clutched.
What are you talking about? The purge. It's coming early. 48 hours. Not at month's end. They want us to seal the lower rings and burn them alive. To reinforce the maw chamber.
Seraphine stiffened. Her grip on the dagger tightened until her knuckles turned white. That is treason, she whispered. To order a purge of your own men it is policy, Elias corrected. He stepped closer, ignoring the way her guards shifted their weight to block his path. And if we don't stop it, we all die. Or worse, we become executioners for a lie. Seraphine stared at him. The alarms in the distance had died down, replaced by a low, menacing thrum that vibrated in Elias's teeth. She looked at the scroll case again, then back at Elias. Her expression was a war between duty and doubt. "Where did you hear this?" she asked.
The system does not issue warnings like this. The map, it was altered. The paths to the capital are hidden. The supply routes are falsified. Someone is starving this place on purpose, so it breaks exactly when they want it to.
Seraphine hesitated. Then, slowly, she unclipped the scroll case and handed it to him. Her movements were precise, deliberate. She trusted Elias's eyes, if not his methods, but her body remained coiled, ready to strike if he betrayed that trust. "Read it," she said. "Then tell me what we do." Elias broke the wax seal. The parchment unfurled with a dry crackle. The text was official, bearing the royal crest of the crown and the seal of the Maw-bound church. His eyes scanned the lines, translating the legalistic jargon into the brutal reality underneath. By order of His Majesty, the annual purge is advanced to 2 days from this writing. All lower rings are to be sealed. Consecrated fire is to be released into the maw chamber. No inmates are to be evacuated. The cost of stability is paid in blood. Elias lowered the scroll. His hands were steady, but his stomach churned. He looked up at Seraphine. "It's real," he said. 1,146 souls to burn, to feed something that eats souls. Seraphine closed her eyes for a brief second. When she opened them, they were cold and hard.
What do you want me to do? Publicly.
His voice dropping to a whisper.
Start the preparations. Move the guards to the sealing gates. Distribute the consecrated fire pots. Make it look like we are obeying.
And privately?
She didn't blink.
Privately, we move the non-violent ones. We map the lower ring routes. We turn the forge ring into a weapon factory. We give every inmate a contract they can't refuse.
Seraphine looked at him sharply.
You are turning this prison into an army. I am turning it into a survivor. Can you defend that order in daylight, Captain?
Seraphine looked at the guards around her. Then she looked at the dark tunnels stretching out from the hall. "Give me an order I can defend in daylight."
And I will make hell itself obey it. I need you to open the forge ring now.
Seraphine nodded. She turned to her guards.
Iron Mantle, move out. Secure the forge ring access points. No one enters without my word.
The guards snapped to attention and ran off toward the lower levels. Seraphine looked back at Elias. Her face was grim, but there was a spark of purpose in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She believed in the fight, even if she hated the method the forge ring did not welcome them. It smelled of ozone and old copper, a metallic tang that coated Elias's tongue. The massive stone doors were sealed by rusted bars thick as tree trunks, held shut by a magical lock that pulsed with a faint, sickly violet light. Seraphine stood before the mechanism, her hands moving with practiced efficiency over the pressure plates and lever systems. She didn't look at Elias. Behind them, the air shimmered. Vera Knox stepped out of the shadows between 2 crates of rotting grain sacks. She wore a cloak of woven darkness that seemed to drink the dim lantern light, her face a mask of amused interest. Her fingers, long and dexterous, tapped rhythmically against the hilt of a dagger she had no intention of using yet.
You're loud.
Tilting her head.
I can hear your ambition from 3 rings down. It smells like iron.
Seraphine paused, one hand on a lever. "And you smell like trouble, Knox. We don't have time for riddles." Vera chuckled, the sound dry and sharp like cracking bone. "Oh, Captain, you still think in straight lines. Lines end. Curves continue. Mr. Rook has offered me a wager, haven't you? A seat at the table? Or just another piece on the board?" Elias stepped forward, brushing past Seraphine to stand between the captain and the shadow broker. He kept his voice low, level. Vera's eyes narrowed, calculating.
Survival is a cheap commodity in Hellgate. Everything here is for sale. What is your offer? Freedom? No, you can't grant that yet. Power? Dangerous, but interesting. I'm granting you a contract, real ones. Not the Crown's lies. You want control over the intelligence network? I'll give you the keys to the surveillance nodes in the upper ring. You want the Velvet Knives recognized as a legitimate faction? I'll write it into the system law, but only if you help me unlock this door.
Vera laughed softly. "Then help me fill in the gaps," Elias countered. "Or stay here and watch everyone you know burn when Caldus arrives tomorrow morning." Vera's smile faded. She looked toward the ceiling, listening to the distant thrum of alarms and the occasional roar of a monster breaking through another breached wall. The fear was there beneath the calculation. It always was. "Fine," she said finally. "I'll help you turn this rusted hulk open, but when we're inside, I want the first look at the blueprints, and I want double the usual cut of any contracts I broker."
Can we skip the bargaining? The clock is ticking, and Dorian's wolves are still at the infirmary gate. Agreed.
He turned back to Seraphine.
With her help, we can override the physical lock. But the magical seal requires a key, a blood key.
Seraphine stiffened.
No, yours would be wasted. We need someone who understands the old magic. Vera knows the syntax of these wards.
Vera stepped up to the locking mechanism, her fingers tracing the glowing runes. "It's not just syntax, darling. It's a conversation. And I don't like talking to dead stones." She looked at Elias. "I need a drop of your blood, the warden's essence, to prove you're the one in charge." Elias didn't hesitate. He pulled a small dagger from his boot and sliced his palm. The blood welled up, bright and red against his pale skin. He held it out to Vera. She watched it with a mixture of curiosity and revulsion, then dipped her finger into the wound and touched the central rune. The stone groaned. The violet light flickered, then died. The massive bars shuddered and retracted with a grinding screech that echoed through the entire lower ring. The doors swung open, revealing a cavernous space filled with dormant forges, anvil-sized hammers suspended by chains and shelves of raw materials that had not been touched in decades.
Welcome to the arsenal. Now we work.
The door to the forge ring burst open again. This time, it wasn't Seraphine or Vera who entered, but a man in pristine white robes, his face serene and terrifyingly calm. Brother Caldus Meyer stepped across the threshold, followed by 4 smiling priests carrying censers that emitted clouds of sweet, cloying incense. The scent clashed violently with the smell of oil and metal in the room.
"Mr. Rook,
His voice soft, paternal, and utterly devoid of warmth.
you are hard to find when one is busy saving a prison. I brought blessings for your renovation."
Elias froze. He knew that voice. He had seen it in the files on the purge decree. But seeing the man was different from reading Caldus Meyer set the censor on a workbench, knocking over a jar of iron filings. He didn't flinch. "The crown is generous," he continued, his hands folding neatly inside his sleeves. "They see your diligence in securing the lower rings. It is almost time for the consecration." Seraphine stepped forward, her hand resting on the pommel of her sword. Her knuckles were white. "We are preparing for a breach, chaplain, not a celebration." Caldus smiled at her, a gentle, pitying curve of lips. "A breach is merely an opportunity for purification, Captain Vale. You have done well to seal the gates. Now you must prepare the fuel." Elias kept his face still. The system text hovered in his peripheral vision, red and pulsing. He focused on Caldus, dissecting him with the cold precision of a disaster investigator reading a collapse report.
The decree says 48 hours. You are here early.
"Time is a river, Elias."
Walking toward the center of the room. The priests fanned out, incense trailing behind them like ghosts. "And I am the stone that breaks its flow. The maw chamber grows restless. It demands fresh souls before the moon turns. We cannot risk delay." Vera leaned against a crate, watching Caldus with narrowed eyes. She didn't speak, but her posture screamed warning. She knew the game. This wasn't a religious visit. It was a checkmate.
And if I refuse?
His voice was flat, dead. Caldus stopped. He turned slowly, his expression shifting from paternal to something harder, older. "Refusal is not in the vocabulary of Hellgate, Mr. Rook. You are a warden. Wardens enforce order. The purge brings order. Without it, the devourer breaks loose. And do you want that blood on your hands? Or mine?"
I would rather have my hands clean than covered in the ashes of my own inmates. Clean hands build nothing.
Caldus replied softly.
Only stained ones hold power. The crown has given you a gift, Elias. A chance to prove your loyalty, to show that you understand the true cost of safety.
Seraphine's breath hitched. She looked at Elias, waiting. This was the line. Cross it, and she might have to arrest him. Stay back, and she became complicit. Elias met Caldus's gaze. He saw the arrogance there, the absolute certainty that he, Elias Rook, was just a tool to be used and discarded. It was familiar. It was the same arrogance of the executives who signed evacuation orders without looking at the faces in the crowd.
You speak of loyalty, but the decree mentions nothing of my authority to manage the process, only that I must facilitate it.
Irrelevant details. Caldus waved a hand dismissively.
The fire will burn. The dead will serve their purpose. You need only ensure the lower rings are empty of life before we release the flame. Is that so difficult? It requires coordination, mass movement. If I try to move everyone at once, there will be panic. Panic leads to breaches. Breaches lead to chaos.
Then manage them well, Warden. That is why we gave you the system. That is why we let you play with your little factions. Use them. Force them to work. Make them believe they are saving themselves. It makes the final moment sweeter for the devourer.
Vera pushed off the crate, stepping into the light. "You think we're livestock," she said. Her voice was light, playful, but her eyes were cold glass. "That's a dangerous assumption, priest. Livestock gets slaughtered. Wolves bite back." Caldus looked at Vera as if she were a minor insect. "Wolves are still dogs, my dear, and you will be fed until the day you are not." He turned back to Elias. 48 hours, I expect the lower rings sealed by dawn. Do not disappoint me. The crown does not tolerate failure." He picked up his censer and walked toward the door. The priests followed, their footsteps silent on the stone. Caldus paused at the threshold. "Oh, and Mr. Rook? Dorian Ashe has a visitor. A royal courier with new orders. His execution is now immediate. Perhaps you can use his death to motivate the others." The door slammed shut. The scent of incense lingered, choking and sweet. Silence stretched in the forge ring, thick and heavy. Seraphine turned to Elias, her face pale.
He's not asking, Elias. He's ordering a massacre. I know.
He walked to the workbench where Caldus had left the censer. He didn't touch it. He looked at the map of the lower rings spread out before him.
He knows about Dorian.
Her voice tight.
He wants to break Dorian's will, to show you that mercy is a liability. Let him try.
He picked up a quill and dipped it in ink. The nib scratched loudly against the parchment.
Dorian isn't just a prisoner. He's a symbol. If we execute him now, we lose him forever. We need him alive. You can't stop the purge.
The crown has the power. They have the soldiers coming to replace you if you hesitate. I didn't say I was going to stop it.
He drew a thick black line across the Elias drew the line with violent precision, slicing through the ventilation shafts and supply tunnels he had spent weeks reinforcing. He capped the inkwell with a sharp click that echoed like a gunshot.
I don't need to stop the purge.
His voice devoid of any heat, only cold calculation.
I need to survive it.
Seraphine stared at the map, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps.
Survive? You can't save them all. The math doesn't lie, Elias. More than 1,000 die. The math lies if you change the variables.
She stepped closer to the table, her shadow merging with the ink on the parchment. He thinks he's forcing your hand. He doesn't realize he's just speeding up my timetable. Elias looked at her, his eyes narrowing.
What are you suggesting? Give me the keys to the upper ring.
Tapping a finger on the diagram of the guard barracks.
The Iron Mantle is loyal to procedure, not people. If I disrupt their chain of command for 48 hours, they'll be busy protecting the guards instead of herding the sheep.
Seraphine's hand twitched toward her sword hilt. You want me to stand down? To let your velvet knives run wild while Caldus burns the lower levels? I want you to do your job. Elias cut in, his voice sharp as a blade.
Guard the perimeter. Keep the upper ring sealed. Vera handles the internal collapse. That's suicide.
Her eyes locked onto Elias, searching for hesitation. Finding none. If she betrays us, if the breach opens during the purge, if I let Caldus win, everyone dies anyway, Elias interrupted. He looked at Vera. Do you have the leverage to break the Iron Mantle's focus? Vera smiled, a slow, predatory curve of lips that didn't reach her eyes. I have their debts, darling, and their secrets. The crown thinks they own the loyalty of these guards. I know who sells out who. Elias turned back to the map, picking up his quill again. He began redrawing the routes, not for evacuation but for extraction.
Then break them, but leave the maw chamber sealed. I need that door intact for what comes after. And Dorian?
Her voice barely a whisper. Blood tasted like copper and old rain. Elias Rook dragged himself up from the stone floor, his palms slipping on the slick dark water that pooled around cell 7113. The alarms above were a physical weight, shaking dust from the cracked ceiling into his hair. He looked down at his hand. The predecessor's corpse hung limp in the cell doorway, keys scattered like teeth, but pressed firmly. Into Elias's palm was a cracked brass pendant. It felt cold, dead, and utterly heavy. Captain Vale stood at the entrance of the corridor, her armor scarred, 6 guards flanking her with spears leveled. Her eyes narrowed as she looked at him, not with relief, but with the weary disdain one reserves for a corpse that hasn't stopped twitching yet.
If you have a final prayer, make it quick.
Elias didn't look up. He pulled a crumpled map from his tunic, the official prison layout still stained with grease. The system hummed in his skull, a cold, digital presence that overlaid red warnings onto his vision. 11 simultaneous breaches detected. But one warning pulsed brighter than the rest. Prisoners scheduled for execution tomorrow. Dorian Ash. Location: Breach Zone B.
The map is wrong.
Tracing a finger along a corridor that shouldn't exist on paper but glowed red in his mind's eye. The paths to the capital are hidden, deliberately altered. Seraphine stepped closer, her boots splashing through the black rainwater.
The map is Law Rook. The Crown does not lie about geography. The Crown lies about everything else.
Folding the map and shoving it into his pocket. He looked up at her, his face pale but steady. Show me who profits when this place fails. Seraphine's jaw tightened. She gestured to the chaos beyond the gate. The Ashen Company has taken the armory. The velvet knives control the lifts. Your guards are firing into cell blocks because they think the prisoners are breaking out. They don't know it's a purge order from above. A purge, Elias mused. He walked past her, into the open cell where something had clawed through the stone floor from below. Then, I need to find the puppeteer before the puppets tear each other apart. He entered the dark space of Dorian Ash's cell. The air smelled of ozone and rust. In the center, chained to a suppression pillar, was Dorian Ash. The legendary hero looked less like a warrior and more like a man who had been broken and glued back together with sheer will. His chains were thick, etched with runes that sizzled when he moved.
You're late.
His voice was gravel, stripped of its former commanding timbre, but rich with sarcasm.
I expected the executioner. Or perhaps another noble come to watch me bleed for sport. I am not a noble.
Stopping at the edge of the pillar's shadow.
And I'm not here to watch you bleed. I'm here to buy your silence.
Dorian laughed, a harsh barking sound.
You have nothing to trade, Warden. You wake up in a dead man's cell with a broken key and a dead end. I have authority.
He held up the brass pendant. The system flared. Contract initiation. And I know why you're here. Dorian's eyes narrowed.
Do you? Do you know that royal generals sold border villages to monsters so the crown could justify emergency taxes? Do you know they erased my name because I saw the ledger? I know. I'm offering a temporary combat contract. Protect the infirmary corridor from the ash wolves pouring through the breach. In return, I investigate your case. If you're innocent, you walk.
Dorian stopped laughing. He tested his chains, the metal groaning. And if I refuse?
Then you die here, and the monsters eat the children behind the next gate. They're trapped there, Dorian. You've spent 3 years holding back the tunnel beasts for people who want you dead. Why keep saving them now?
Dorian looked toward the dark tunnel behind him, where the howls of ash wolves were beginning to rise. He looked back at Elias, his expression hardening into something fierce and tragic.
Because they are helpless. Then help them. Prove you're more than a weapon to be discarded.
Dorian exhaled slowly. You want a weapon? Elias shook his head. No. Weapons get discarded. I want a man with a reason to return. Dorian snarled, pulling against the chains until the suppression pillar cracked. The runes flared gold. Contract accepted. Outside, the riot grew louder. Screams echoed through the stone. Seraphine's voice cut through the noise from the corridor. Rook, the Ashen Company is breaking through Sector 4. We need you. Elias ignored her for a moment, looking at Dorian.
Stay here until I give the word. Don't let them take the pillar. I wouldn't dream of it.
Though his eyes were already fixed on the dark mouth of the tunnel. Elias turned and ran back into the chaos. The prison was tearing itself apart. Guards fired blindly. Inmates brawled in the halls. He pulled the warden's key from his pocket. It hummed, warm now, responding to the blood on his hands. He found a narrow service corridor near the armory. The air here was thick with smoke. The smoke burned Elias's lungs, thick with the acrid stench of burning timber and spilled blood. He pressed his back against the cold stone wall of the service corridor, listening to the chaos erupting ahead. The Ashen Company was breaking through Sector 4, their battle cries rising like a tide. But beneath the roar of the riot, Elias heard something else. The synchronized clank of armored boots, too precise for panicked guards, too coordinated for confused inmates. He stepped out from the shadows into the main junction. The sight froze his blood. Captain Vale stood 10 paces ahead, her blade drawn, facing not the raging prisoners, but a group of royal soldiers in pristine white armor. They held their spears in perfect formation, blocking the path to the armory. Between them walked Brother Caldus Meyer, his robes spotless, holding a censer that emitted no smoke, only a faint, chilling warmth.
You see it now.
His voice calm, almost soothing amidst the screams.
Chaos is the natural state of Hellgate. Without order, men eat each other. The purge is not a punishment, Elias. It is mercy.
Seraphine's blade wavered slightly as she looked at Caldus, then back toward the rioting cell blocks where her own guards were firing into the crowds. Caldus, stand down. My men are under attack. These soldiers, my men are restoring order. Caldus interrupted gently. He took a step forward, his eyes soft and pitying. We have been patient, Seraphine, but patience wears thin when the wolves are at the door. The Ashen Company takes the armory because we allowed them to think they could win. They do not know that the locks were left open. Elias stepped into the light of the torches, his heart hammering against his ribs.
You triggered this.
His voice was low, but it cut through the din.
The Ashen Company didn't take the armory by accident. The locks were broken from the inside, by you.
Caldus smiled, a paternal expression that made Elias's skin crawl. We provided an opportunity, Warden, just as we have provided the opportunity for the purge. Look at them. He gestured to the terrified faces of the inmates in the adjacent cells, watching the soldiers advance.
They're afraid because you're shooting into their blocks.
He raised the warden's key, the brass pendant glowing with a faint blue light. You're using us to justify the execution. You're manufacturing the crisis so the crown can sweep in and burn it all down. Seraphine stepped between Caldus and Elias, her face pale. Caldus, explain this. Why are we firing on our own people? Caldus sighed, a sound of genuine disappointment.
Because the system is broken, Captain, and sometimes to save the patient, one must cut out the rot. You have served the crown well, but you lack vision. Elias here has no such burden. He sees the utility in destruction. I see a lie.
He looked at Seraphine.
Seraphine. The guards on your left flank, are they firing at the inmates?
Seraphine turned, her eyes scanning the chaos. She raised her hand, signaling her remaining guards to hold fire. She watched as one of Caldus's soldiers took aim not at an inmate, but at a group of surrendering prisoners who had dropped their weapons. The soldier fired. The scream that followed was sharp and final. Seraphine's face went white.
They're shooting at the surrendering ones. Order requires sacrifice.
The bigger picture is that you're lying to everyone.
He raised the warden's key higher. The air around him shivered. Authority surge.
And I'm going to make sure they hear the truth. What are you doing?
His smile faltering for the first time, his hands moved quickly, signaling his guards to raise their spears. Stop him! He's interfering with a royal directive! Elias didn't hesitate. He slammed the warden's key into the stone floor. The impact sent a shock wave through the corridor, cracking the masonry. The system roared in his mind, warden reshape available. One passage. Elias focused on the narrow choke point behind Caldus's men, the service tunnel that led to the upper ventilation shafts, the same shafts connected to the prison's ancient speaking tubes. He poured his will into the stone. The walls groaned, twisting like wet clay. The corridor ahead of Caldus collapsed inward, sealing it off with a thunderous slam of solid rock. Caldus and his elite guards were now trapped in a dead-end killing field, cut off from reinforcements, their escape routes severed by Elias's power.
You've just locked yourselves in.
Breathing hard.
Now, let's see how your mercy sounds through the speaking tubes.
He turned to Seraphine. Captain, I need you to get every inmate and every loyal guard to the junction squares. All of them. Now. Seraphine looked at Caldus, trapped behind the fresh wall, then back at Elias. The fear in her eyes was replaced by a dawning realization. She lowered her blade. If this is a trick, Rook, Seraphine holstered her blade, her hand trembling slightly as she adjusted her grip on the hilt.
I cannot order them, Elias. The Ashen Company is at the armory gates. The Velvet Knives have the lift controls locked down. My men are too few to move through a war zone. Then don't order.
His voice flat, stripped of all warmth. Seraphine stared at him, her eyes wide.
You're asking me to betray the crown. I'm asking you to save the prison.
He tapped his temple, where the system's interface hovered in his peripheral vision. Do it, or I leave you to Caldus's mercy when he breaks through that wall. And he will break through. It is only a matter of time. Seraphine turned on her heel, her boots clacking sharply against the stone. She raised her voice, projecting it toward the shadows where her remaining loyalists hid. All Iron Mantle units, fall back to the central plaza. Form a perimeter around the warden. Anyone who fires without the warden's express command is hereby relieved of duty. A murmur of confusion rippled through the corridor, but Elias heard the clatter of retreating boots. He turned back to Caldus, who was pounding on the newly formed stone wall with a spear, his face contorted in rage.
This is an outrage.
His voice muffled by the rock.
You are a prisoner. You have no authority here. The crown will hang you for this insurrection.
Elias walked to the speaking tube grill embedded in the wall next to Caldus's position. He placed his ear against the cold metal. The tube ran deep into the prison's ventilation system, connecting every major sector to the central broadcast hub. He closed his eyes and focused on the warden's key. It pulsed against his palm, hot and heavy, broadcast active. The system whispered in his mind. Audio feed. All channels. Elias leaned close to the tube. Caldus, he said clearly.
Can you hear me? I hope so, because the whole prison is listening.
Behind him, Dorian Ashe appeared at the end of the corridor, leaning on a makeshift crutch fashioned from a broken spear shaft. His armor was scorched, his face smeared with soot and blood, but his eyes were bright with lethal focus. To everyone, he looked up at Caldus through the grill. You want to prove that Hellgate is a beast that must be purged? Let's give them the proof. What are you doing? Caldus demanded, stopping his pounding. He looked around, suddenly aware of the silence that had fallen over the corridor. The fighting had stopped. Inmates were peering out of their cells. Guards were lowering their weapons, confused by the sudden broadcast.
I am reading a confession.
He pressed his hand against the speaking tube grill, activating the recording function stored within the warden's key. You, Brother Caldus Meyer, and your royal agents triggered this riot. You left the armory locks open for the Ashen Company. You seized the lift controls to isolate the loyalists. You ordered guards to shoot surrendering prisoners to create fear. Caldus's face drained of color.
This is a fabrication. A lie spun by a madman. Listen closely.
He gestured to the recording indicator blinking red on his wrist interface. The audio is live. It will play in every cell, every block, every yard. You have 3 seconds to recant before I release the rest. Seraphine's voice echoed from the plaza below, amplified by the tube system. Caldus, are you claiming responsibility for the murders in Sector 4? Look at me. Are you doing this on behalf of the Crown? Caldus hesitated, his eyes darting to his guards, who were now looking at him with dawning horror and doubt. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. The weight of his own actions was pressing down on him, visible in the tightness of his jaw, the way his hands shook around the sensor. Elias said loudly, ensuring every word carried through the tubes.
You were told the man beside you was your enemy. Look at the men who gave that order. They are the only ones here who never intended to bleed. Not ours. Yours.
Caldus sank to his knees, his head bowing in defeat. The royal guards behind him lowered their spears, one by one, turning away from him in disgust. Seraphine stepped into Elias's field of view, her face grim but resolute. The prisoners are gathering at the plaza. They want answers, and Caldus, Elias released the broadcast and stepped back from the wall. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise had been. It was the silence of a truth too large to ignore.
We don't execute him.
He looked at Seraphine.
Captain, bring me his chains. And bring me a quill and parchment.
Seraphine raised an eyebrow.
I'm going to make him useful.
He turned to Dorian. Dorian shifted his weight, the metal chains on his wrists clinking against the stone floor with a sharp, rhythmic clink-clink. Useful? He's a traitor. a butcher. His eyes burned into Caldus, who remained slumped against the wall, trembling. The crown sent him to let us die, to justify the purge. You want to write a contract with the man who signed our death warrant. Elias did not look away from Caldus. He held the quill out, the nib hovering over the blank parchment Seraphine had produced. The paper trembled in her grip, caught between his hand and Dorian's glare.
The crown is already dead to this prison. I am not writing for them. I am writing for Hellgate. Caldus understands bureaucracy. He understands hierarchy. He knows how the crown moves its pieces. We need that knowledge, not a corpse.
Caldus looked up, his eyes wide and watery. Please, he whispered. I understand the burden of command. Elias cut in, his voice cold. I understand that you sold villages to monsters to balance a ledger. Do not insult me by pretending it was for the greater good. It was for your position. Seraphine stepped forward, her sword tip resting on Caldus's shoulder. He is right, Chaplain. The Ashen Company has confirmed it. Your orders came from the Royal Chancellery. Direct lines, sealed with the crown's wax. Caldus flinched as if struck. He looked at Dorian, then at Seraphine, and finally at Elias. The color had returned to his face, but it was the pale gray of ash. And what? He asked, his voice steady for the first time, devoid of its earlier paternal softness.
Do you propose to do with me? I am a royal chaplain. You cannot imprison me without triggering a diplomatic incident that will burn this city to the ground. That is why you will be writing it.
He tapped the parchment.
You will draft the new protocols. You will tell me how the crown funds its purges, who the agents are, and where the supply lines run. In exchange, you live, and your superiors believe you are still in control.
Dorian laughed, a harsh barking sound. Elias turned his gaze to Dorian. The inmate's stance was rigid, ready to spring if Elias made the wrong move. If he writes lies, I will know. I have inspectors now. Do you? Dorian's jaw tightened. He looked at the chains binding him to the suppression pillar, then at the open corridor where his men were watching from the shadows. He spat on the ground near Caldus's knee.
I don't trust him.
But I trust your power more. If you break that promise, Elias, I will tear your throat out with these chains. You have my word.
It was not a plea. It was a statement of fact. He began to write, the scratch of the nib loud in the sudden silence. As he wrote, the system chimed in his mind, not with a warning, but with a notification. New prison doctrine unlocked, earned sentence reduction. Seraphine watched him write, her expression unreadable. Before today, sentences were fixed. Mandatory. Brutal. Now they are negotiable, Elias finished. He dipped the quill again, ink pooling at the tip. Caldus will help me design a system where labor reduces time, where useful skills earn clemency. It is not mercy. It is efficiency. We need workers more than we need bodies in the ground. Caldus stared at the parchment as Elias's hand moved across it. His eyes widened.
I am creating a structure, one where you hold the pen, Caldus. Draft the first clause. Royal agents shall be integrated into the correctional workforce for indefinite restitution labor. Sentences may be reduced by verified contribution to prison stability.
Caldus looked at the words he was being forced to dictate. He looked up at Elias, realization dawning in his eyes.
You are making us dependent on you.
If I leave, my masters will kill me. If I stay, I need your permission to survive. You have trapped me in a cage of my own logic. Welcome to Hellgate.
He finished the line and capped the quill with a decisive click. He handed the parchment to Seraphine. Keep this. It is now binding law. Seraphine took the paper, her fingers brushing the ink. She looked at Elias, then at the gathered guards who were slowly emerging from the shadows of the corridor. The fighting had stopped. The silence was absolute.
They see that you didn't execute Caldus. They see your writing. Let them watch.
He turned to Dorian, who was still chained, waiting for a response to his earlier threat. Dorian, the Ashen Company holds the armory. You have the leverage now. Dorian nodded slowly. My men are ready to press the advantage. We can take the upper levels. We can storm the gates. The iron grate beneath Elias's palms was hot enough to blister skin, but he did not pull back. The furnace ring, once a cold, dead heart of Hellgate, now pulsed with a rhythmic golden light that matched the beating of his own terrified heart. Sweat stung his eyes as he forced the final ward chain into place, the metal screaming against the stone floor. Above him, the sky was choked with smoke from the lower rings, smoke from the prisoners who had not yet been burned alive by the purge decree.
Hold it.
The legendary hero's chains rattled violently as he braced his shoulder against the suppression pillar.
The conduit is splitting. I have it.
His voice raw, he jammed the cracked brass pendant, the only key that mattered, into the fissure in the furnace core. If this burns out, we all die. Better dead than sacrificed to a monster you don't understand, a guard sneered from the upper gantry. Captain Vale stood there, her face pale, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. She was watching Elias with a mixture of dread and dawning horror. "Rook, stop this madness. The Crown sent us to burn the breach, not feed it." Elias didn't look up. He felt the system's cold logic pressing against his mind, calculating mana reserves, blood costs, and probability outcomes. Mana, critical. Blood, negligible. Probability of survival, 4%.
You're wrong, Captain.
His fingers bleeding as the metal bit into his flesh.
The Crown didn't send you to burn the breach. They sent you to make sure it stayed open long enough to justify the tax hike.
Seraphine flinched.
What? Look at your orders.
Finally glancing up, his eyes burning with the reflection of the golden fire. Clause 4, Section 9. In the event of catastrophic breach failure, authorize liquidation of Sector 3 to preserve Crown assets. There are no assets down there, just prisoners. The guard at the gantry shifted uncomfortably.
Sir, my orders were explicit. My contract overrides your orders.
Turning back to the furnace, the heat was unbearable now, singing his eyebrows. He didn't care. He had spent his life calculating which cities could be saved and which had to be abandoned. This was not a city. It was a cage, and he would not let it break on the backs of the weak. He twisted the pendant. The furnace groaned. The golden light shifted from blinding white to a deep, resonant crimson. Instead of exploding upward, the consecrated fire slammed downward, twisting into a lattice of ward chains that shot through the stone floor like spears of light. They pierced the darkness beneath Hellgate, pinning something massive, something ancient, in place. Silence fell over the maw chamber. The smoke above began to thin. The screams from the lower rings stopped. Elias collapsed against the hot metal, gasping for air. His hands were charred black. He looked up. Seraphine was staring at him, her sword drawn but not raised. You bound it," she whispered. "You didn't kill it. You bound it." "I delayed it," Elias corrected, wiping blood from his eyes. "For now, the lower rings are safe. The purge is cancelled." A cheer rose from the prisoners gathered at the periphery of the chamber. Dorian Ashe slumped against his pillar, laughing breathlessly.
You idiot.
His voice tired but warm.
You actually did it.
Elias didn't smile. He felt a cold weight in his chest. The victory was real, but the system had already begun to scroll through new notifications, red and urgent. Victory condition met. Purge prevented prison integrity. 46% royal hostility. Crown of Aurelian, openly hostile. Elias frowned. The text didn't end there. Below the hostility notification, another line appeared, glowing with an unfamiliar violet hue. New objective detected. Inspect the door beneath the maw chamber.
The system is acting strange.
He looked at Seraphine.
Captain, I need a guard detail. There's something under us.
Seraphine shook her head slowly. The Crown has just declared you a traitor, Elias Rook. They're sending an army to surround Hellgate. We don't have guards. We have hostages. Elias froze. Above the chamber, distant horns blew, long mournful notes that signaled the approach of royal cavalry. But below, something else stirred. The stone floor beneath the furnace began to crack. Not from heat, but from pressure. A massive door, sealed for centuries, groaned open, revealing a dark shaft descending into impossible depths. The air that rushed out was cold and smelled of old blood and ozone. Elias crawled to the edge. Below, in the darkness, sat a throne made of bone and rusted iron. On its backrest was the exact same cracked key symbol as the pendant in Elias's pocket. A voice echoed from the abyss, not through the air, but directly into Elias's mind. It was dry, ancient, and infinitely weary. "You have saved the prisoners." Elias gripped his glowing key, his knuckles white. "What are you?" the darkness answered, soft as a tomb closing. "The first thing they ever locked away." Dorian pulled himself up from the suppression pillar, his chains clinking with every strained movement. He wiped soot from his forehead, leaving a dark smear across his brow,
It's not just a throne.
limping toward the edge of the shaft. His eyes were fixed on the symbol glowing in the darkness below. It's a claim. You think you stopped the purge? You only postponed the inevitable. Seraphine holstered her sword, her hand trembling slightly as she adjusted her gauntlet. She looked from Dorian to Elias, her face pale in the violet light of the system's notification,
Traitor!
the word tasting bitter on her tongue.
The Crown has declared you so. They are bringing siege engines. If that thing wakes up, we're all dead either way.
Elias ignored her. He stepped closer to the pit, the heat of the furnace fading from his skin as he focused on the cold pull of the shaft below. The pendant in his pocket grew heavy, warm against his thigh, vibrating in time with the voice that had just spoken.
It called me First Warden.
His voice low.
Look at the symbol, Seraphine. Really look at it.
Seraphine squinted into the gloom, leaning forward until her shadow fell over the stone lip of the shaft. The violet light caught the rusted iron curves of the throne. "That's the royal crest," she whispered, her breath hitching.
No. That's older. That's before the Aurelian line. It's the same symbol on my key.
He pulled the cracked brass pendant from his pocket. It was glowing now, a steady rhythmic pulse that matched the thrumming of the dungeon itself. My predecessor left it to me. Why would a dead warden leave a key to a throne he never sat in? Dorian laughed, a dry, hacking sound that echoed off the stone walls. He kicked at a loose pebble, watching it vanish into the dark.
Because the throne was empty, for 300 years every warden has been a jailer, a slave to the Crown's contracts. But this?
He pointed a gloved finger at the abyss. This is something else. This is the source, and you just woke it up. Elias looked down into the darkness again. The throne sat in the center of a vast circular chamber, surrounded by pillars that seemed to be made of frozen time. In the center of the seat rested a crown of black iron, twisted and sharp.
I didn't wake it. It called to me. It knows who I am. You don't know anything about him.
Dorian snapped, turning away from the edge. He walked back toward the furnace, wincing as his legs shook. You know how to bargain. You know how to bind threats with paper and ink. But this, he gestured vaguely at the pit. This is old magic, older than your system, older than the Crown. Seraphine stepped between them, her sword hilt clicking against her hip. She looked small in the vastness of the maw chamber, but her posture was rigid.
I don't care what he is.
I care that the horns above are getting louder. The royal army is here. They will burn this gate down before sunset. Let them come.
He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The air around him seemed to drop in temperature, the violet light of the system flaring briefly before settling into a calm, steady glow. We have the forge ring. We have the lower rings secured. And now we have a door that no one has opened in centuries. Dorian stopped walking. He turned slowly, his eyes narrowing.
You're planning to go down there.
Dorian said. It wasn't a question.
I have to.
He looked at Seraphine.
Captain, you can leave. Take your guards. The Crown has declared me a traitor. If you stay, you'll be executed as well.
Seraphine stared at him, her jaw tight. For a moment, Elias thought she might draw her sword. Instead, she exhaled sharply, turning on her heel.
I'm not leaving you to die alone. I'm staying to make sure you don't bring this plague up to the surface. If that thing gets out, I'll kill you myself.
Elias nodded once. Fair enough. He turned back to Dorian. The hero was watching him with an expression that was hard to read, part fear, part respect, part pity.
You're making a mistake.
That throne isn't a gift. It's a test. And the last man who tried to sit in it was erased from history. Good thing I'm not looking for glory.
He looked down at the key in his hand. It was pulling him now, tugging toward the shaft like a compass needle finding north. I'm looking for survival. For them. He nodded toward the prisoners still gathering at the edges of the chamber, their faces pale but alive. Dorian sighed, running a hand through his tangled hair. He walked over to the edge again, standing shoulder to shoulder with Elias.
If you go down there,
You'll need more than a key. You'll need a ward. And you'll need someone who knows how to kill what's in the dark. I have a contract.
He tapped his chest,
You're still bound to me, Ash. You need terms.
his voice cutting through the heavy silence of the maw chamber.
Not just a promise. The system requires binding law.
Dorian's eyes narrowed. He kicked a shard of stone into the dark, listening to it vanish without a sound. Terms imply equality. I know you don't have that luxury right now, Warden. I am not your warden yet, Elias countered. He stepped closer to Dorian, forcing the hero to look him in the eye. I am the man who stopped the purge, and I am the only one who can keep the crown from burning us all alive. If you want to stay, you sign. If you walk away, you're just another corpse waiting for a tunnel. Seraphine stepped forward, her gauntleted hand resting on the hilt of her sword. I'll vouch for his combat utility, not his loyalty, but if he stays, we have a chance against the cavalry. Dorian looked at Seraphine, then back to Elias. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face.
You're bargaining with me while surrounded by an army and a god? That's either bravery or insanity. It's business.
He pulled a slip of parchment from his tunic. It materialized in his hands as he focused, the ink flowing like blood. Protect the maw chamber entrance for 1 hour. Hold back the vanguard. In exchange, I will review your file. I will find the evidence that proves your innocence. Dorian stared at the parchment. He didn't reach for it immediately.
You can't just find evidence. The crown erased me. I'm a disaster inspector. I don't fix things. I expose why they broke. And right now the system is broken in your favor. Sign.
Dorian snatched the parchment from Elias's hand. He scanned it quickly, then signed with a jagged stroke of his own blood. The paper ignited in blue flame, dissolving into ash that swirled around his ankles before vanishing.
Ash Wolf.
Rolling his shoulders, the chains on his wrists clinked softly.
Try not to die while I'm working. It would be a waste of good ink.
He turned toward the stairs leading up to the surface, his posture shifting from prisoner to soldier. Elias watched him go, then looked at Seraphine.
Captain, you have a choice. The crown has declared you a traitor by association. Stay, and you fight your own government. Leave, and you might live.
Seraphine adjusted her helmet, hiding her eyes.
I've been a soldier for 20 years, Rook. I don't quit, not even when the flag burns. Good.
He turned his attention back to the shaft. The pendant in his pocket was hot now, burning against his thigh like a coal. Then help me down there. We need to see what sits on that throne before we decide who sits on it. Seraphine hesitated only for a second before nodding. She drew her sword and began to descend the makeshift ladder Elias had rigged from furnace chains. Elias followed, stepping into the darkness behind her. The air in the shaft was thick with ozone and the smell of old dust. The walls were lined with runes that pulsed in time with Elias's heartbeat. Every step downward felt like sinking into water. The light from the chamber above shrunk to a coin-sized circle, then nothing.
The throne is still there.
Her voice echoing strangely in the narrow space.
It hasn't moved. It's waiting.
He pulled the glowing key from his pocket. It illuminated the path ahead with a pale, violet light. The runes on the walls flared brighter as the key approached. Look at the floor. These aren't just stones, they're ribs. Seraphine stopped, her boot crunching on something brittle. She shone her torch down. Bones. Thousands of them, woven into the architecture like rebar in concrete.
What are we walking on?
Her voice tight.
Foundation.
He kept moving.
Or a cage. It depends on who built it.
At the bottom of the shaft, the floor opened into a vast circular chamber. The throne sat in the center, untouched by time or decay. It looked less like furniture and more like an extension of the room itself. The cracked key symbol on its backrest glowed with the same intensity as Elias's key. Elias approached the throne slowly. He could feel the weight of centuries pressing against his skin. The air grew colder, heavier.
You called me First Warden. What is it?
The darkness behind the throne coalesced. Shadows peeled away from the walls, forming a shape that was almost human, but wrong. Too many joints, too much depth. A voice spoke not in his mind this time, but from the air itself. It was the sound of grinding tectonic plates. You have saved the prisoners. Elias gripped his glowing key tighter. I asked you a question. What are you? The shadow shifted, stepping forward. One colossal eye opened in the gloom, yellow and ancient. It fixed on Elias with an intensity that made his knees buckle. The first thing they ever locked away.